Chapter 1520. A half-ancestor Protoss sneered. Well, you still dare to take the initiative to come over. You really don't know what death is. You should be the ones who don't know what death is. Zemo said indifferently. He didn't stop, and soon arrived in front of a Protoss knight. Kill! The blood chi in this Protoss knight's body surged. With a loud shout, he raised his strong and powerful leg and swept it toward Zemo's head. This time, there was a buzzing sound in the air, and a series of afterimages appeared. The power of this kick was too strong and too fast. If this kick hit, this Protoss knight was confident that he could directly kick Zemo's head into pieces. Bang! However, just as this kick was about to hit Zemo's temple, a white palm appeared on this Protoss knight's leg. This Protoss knight's eyes widened as he watched this scene in disbelief. The other Protoss also had looks of disbelief in their eyes. A human actually blocked the power of a Protoss in close combat. Zemo stretched out his hand and grabbed the Protoss knight's ankle like an iron hoop. He smiled and said, "Is this the power of you Protoss? You're too weak." Crack! Zemo exerted strength in his palm and directly crushed the Protoss knight's ankle. Ah! A layer of cold sweat instantly dripped down the face of the Protoss knight, and he opened his mouth and let out a shrill scream. However, this Protoss knight was also impressive. He could still maintain his consciousness amidst the scream, and didn't retreat in panic. Instead, he directly urged his blood chi, and wanted to erupt with a bloodline phenomenon. Bang! Zemo didn't give him the chance at all. He stepped forward and punched this person's chest. The chest of this Protoss knight was instantly penetrated, and a blood arrow as thick as an arm burst out. His heart exploded, and his blood chi rapidly flowed out. This person's bloodline phenomenon had not completely condensed before it rapidly dissipated, due to the severe loss of blood chi. Zemo's attacks did not stop. After crushing the Protoss knight's ankle, Zemo took a step forward and punched him in the chest. Then he raised his palm and held the man's chin. This move was a variation of the Blood Ape's fruit offering. Since Zemo had started cultivating, he was no longer restricted to a single move. He created the martial scripture, which made him invincible in close combat. Every punch or palm, every movement of his contained profound mysteries. Crack! The Protoss knight's head was flung to the back, its neck bone shattered. A primordial spirit escaped from the head of the Protoss knight with a panicked expression. However, before he could completely escape from his corporeal body, he saw Zemo blow gently. A white light flashed and cut his primordial spirit into two. With Zemo's current physical body, blood chi, and powerful internal organs, a casual exhalation of his breath was like a flying sword, not inferior to a divine weapon. The two of them exchanged blows so quickly that it only took a few breaths. This Protoss knight's every move seemed to be within Zemo's expectations. He was completely restrained and could not fight back. The other Protoss were not far away. By the time the Protoss reacted, this Protoss knight was already dead. Arrogant ant. How dare you? The deities were furious, and they all berated him. Zemo sneered and said, "What noble race, what powerful civilization. That's all there is to it." Zemo's feet landed heavily on the ground. Boom! In an instant the earth shook. "Today I'll let you see my Araki Takashi's methods." Zemo roared and circulated his blood chi. The sound of waves came from his body as he charged toward a half-martial ancestor Protoss. This Protoss half-martial ancestor relied on his cultivation realm to be half a level higher than Zemo. He was fearless, and also circulated his blood chi, and punched toward Zemo. Bang! The two fists collided. Endless pain appeared on the Protoss half-martial ancestor's face. He couldn't help but grunt and retreat subconsciously. This head-on collision numbed his entire arm. "I was careless." The Protoss half-martial ancestor was alarmed. "I should have directly used my bloodline phenomenon. You have no chance." Zemo's eyes lit up as he suddenly spoke, and released a sound domain secret technique. Kill! His voice was like thunder, instantly exploding in the Protoss half-martial ancestor's ears. The two of them were too close to each other. This loud roar shook the Protoss half-martial ancestor's ears until they buzzed. There was a boom in his mind, and his consciousness paused for a short moment. This momentary pause was enough to determine Su Zimo's life and death. Su Zimo stretched out his finger and poked the Protoss half-martial ancestor's glabella. Poof! A bloody hole appeared. Blood gushed out. The Protoss half-martial ancestor had just recovered from thunderclap kill when he discovered that his consciousness was gradually sinking. Below him was a boundless abyss of darkness. The Protoss half-martial ancestor's vitality disappeared. His eyes were unfocused, and he fell straight down. His divine spirit was destroyed, and he died on the spot. In less than 10 breaths, 2 Protoss were dead. One of them was even a Protoss half-martial ancestor. Su Zimo's massacre had just begun. His figure flickered, and he directly crashed into the crowd of Protoss. He was like a fierce horse, rampaging without any scruples. A Protoss knight wanted to block Su Zimo's path, but he was sent flying by Su Zimo. His physical body exploded in midair, turning into a cloud of blood mist. Only his primordial spirit escaped. The other Protoss knights couldn't stop Su Zimo's footsteps. Everywhere he passed, people were thrown off their feet. No one could withstand his sharpness. The entire army of light was completely scattered by Su Zimo. These Protoss knights put away their armor, swords and shields and became bare-handed. Su Zimo was also bare-handed. However, Su Zimo's physical body was the body of the 7th stage creation Qinglian, which was equivalent to a Khanate mighty figure's Dharma artifact. Although these Protoss's physical bodies and bloodlines were powerful, they couldn't withstand the power of the 7th stage creation Qinglian. Without the protection of their armor, these Protoss regained their freedom of movement. However, their casualties were even more tragic as they fought Su Zimo in close combat. If they were hit by the creation Qinglian, they would either die or be injured. Not long after, close to 100 Protoss died under the mystic Magnet Mountain. The army of light formed by thousands of prodigies and monsters from the continent of gods was slaughtered until they fled in all directions. Only about 500 people were left. Everyone, don't panic. Listen to my command. The leader of the Protoss commanders finally couldn't hold it in anymore. He stood up again and used his divine consciousness to continuously transmit voice transmissions to command the remaining Protoss knights. If more than 500 Protoss knights were to gather together, they would still be an extremely terrifying force. Under the command of the Protoss commanders, the numerous Protoss knights gradually formed an encirclement around Su Zimo. A hint of mockery flashed across Su Zimo's eyes. He didn't break out of the encirclement and just allowed them to surround him. Chapter 1521. Seeing that the encirclement was about to take shape, the Protoss leader suddenly shouted, "Everyone, activate your bloodline avatars." With a single order. Boom, boom, boom. Ancient and majestic pyramids appeared beneath the Protoss. Billions of living beings knelt around each pyramid, praying devoutly as they looked up at the Protoss at the top of the pyramid. An endless stream of power surged into the Protoss's body. The auras of the Protoss continued to rise. This was the terror of Protoss. Once a Protoss bloodline awakened, even without cultivation, they would produce bloodline avatars. More than 500 pyramids floated in midair, looking incomparably shocking. The figures of the Protoss slowly rose, becoming indistinguishable from heaven and earth. An unimaginably enormous pressure descended upon them. Qinglian's true body was somewhat unable to withstand this pressure. The bones in her body creaked, as if they were about to fall apart. "Ah!" Su Zimo roared into the sky. The aura in his body continued to rise, reaching a peak in the blink of an eye. Su Zimo's figure seemed to have disappeared, becoming faintly discernible. A jade-green Qinglian that soared into the sky appeared in his original spot. This Qinglian was crystal clear, jade-like, and filled with endless light. Under the gazes of the gods, a lotus flower slowly bloomed at the top of this Qinglian, bursting forth with auspicious colors. This is... The gods looked up, shock in their eyes. If they had already become one with heaven and earth, indistinguishable from each other, then the power of this Qinglian had already broken through heaven and earth. All of a sudden, the Qinglian swayed gently. Heaven and earth trembled as ripples appeared in the void. It was as if a pebble had fallen into a calm lake. The ripples were weak and spread toward the 500 ancient pyramids in the surroundings. A terrifying scene occurred. This seemingly weak ripple swept past the pyramids, causing cracks to appear on the pyramids. The cracks rapidly expanded and spread. Rumble! The pyramids shattered, collapsed, and turned into nothingness under the influence of the ripples. Many Protoss were shocked. If it was 20 years ago, Suzimo's bloodline phenomenon wouldn't have been able to withstand so many Protoss phenomena. However, after absorbing and refining the carefree wood, Suzimo's Qinglian true body grew crazily. Be it in terms of strength or bloodline, they both had obvious leaps and bounds. Right now, Qinglian's true body was approaching the 8th grade creation realm, Qinglian. Although there was still some distance between them, it was no longer out of reach. Of course, Suzimo's bloodline phenomenon wasn't able to suppress all 500 pyramids. However, after destroying more than 200 pyramids, Suzimo's Qinglian avatar could no longer hold on. However, this was already enough. More than 200 pyramids collapsed, and the encirclement of many Protoss collapsed in an instant. Suzimo sneered. His figure appeared again, turning into a golden light. He arrived in front of a Protoss knight, and struck with a backhand palm. The Protoss knight's bloodline phenomenon collapsed, and his blood essence fluctuated. Before he could react, Suzimo had already arrived in front of him. You! The Protoss only had time to say one word before he hurriedly raised his arms, wanting to block Suzimo's power. Crack! Suzimo's palm directly broke the Protoss's arms. His palm pressed down and slapped the person's head. The person's essence spirit was instantly shattered, and his body fell from midair. The other Protoss reacted and attacked. However, Suzimo's figure flickered again, and he disappeared from the spot. When he reappeared, he was beside another Protoss, a half-martial ancestor. He did the same thing and released a killing move. The two of them fought speed, and exchanged 3 to 4 rounds. The half-martial ancestor Protoss's face was pale. He finally couldn't hold on anymore. All of a sudden, specks of golden light surged in the eyes of the half-martial ancestor Protoss. In the blink of an eye, his eyes turned completely golden. They were cold and emotionless with endless might, as though they were going to judge all the sins in the world. God's eye. Suzimo's heart skipped a beat. Back in the Battle of Myriad Phenomenon City, he had fought against the Protoss. That Protoss had cultivated the God's Eye technique, which was extremely similar to the scene before him. Of course, even Suzimo felt his heart palpitate when the half-martial ancestor Protoss released God's Eye. The God's Eye of the half-martial ancestor Protoss actually contained a trace of divine power. Suzimo was alarmed. He didn't dare to be careless. Ethereal wings, lightning escape, and earth-traversing golden light burst forth at the same time. He retreated and flashed continuously, trying to avoid the power of the God's Eye. Even a rank 7 creation cultivator like Qinglian might not be able to withstand a God's Eye that contained a trace of divine power. However, Suzimo didn't dare to take the risk. There were still more than 500 Protoss here. There was also the legendary Dark Army behind them. If Qinglian's true body was severely injured because of this God's Eye, the losses would outweigh the gains. The half-martial ancestor Protoss was also extremely smart. Seeing that Suzimo was using his escape technique to escape, he wasn't in a hurry to release his eye technique. Instead, he constantly closed the distance between him and Suzimo. He knew very well that if he released this eye technique, it would no longer be a threat to Suzimo. However, if he didn't release it and continued to stare at Suzimo, there would always be a sharp sword hanging above Suzimo's head, and it would slash down at any time. Suzimo would definitely be restrained. The other Protoss also noticed this scene. They all took action and cooperated with the half-martial ancestor Protoss. Some Protoss propped up their bloodline avatars and surrounded Suzimo. Some Protoss also activated their eye techniques. Their eyes flickered with golden light. They focused on Suzimo and kept closing the distance between them and Suzimo. Those who could join the army of light were all monsters on the continent of gods. Every Protoss knight had cultivated a God's Eye. More than 1,000 golden eyes were all focused on him. Suzimo only felt his scalp tingle, and his hair stand on end. In the blink of an eye, the situation had quietly changed. The remaining 500-odd Protoss gradually took control of the situation. Qingmian's true body was forged by Su Zimo. Although she had cultivated the fiend's sex eye techniques, they weren't strong and couldn't compete with God's eye at all. The terrifying thing about eye techniques was that they were instantaneous. Without any warning, the moment Su Zimo let down his guard, a visual technique had already descended. Pust! Su Zimo dodged by a hair's breadth. The eye technique landed on the canyon rocks behind him and instantly punched two bottomless holes. Under the pressure of some Protoss bloodline avatars, Su Zimo's space to dodge became smaller and smaller. Pust! Pust! Another two eye techniques descended. Su Zimo's body had already distorted to an unimaginable degree before he could dodge the two eye techniques. The two eye techniques tore through the air and hit the skeleton of a massive demon beast. Was this the purple from the primordial era? Neon retort. Chapter 1522. A divine eye that could easily penetrate Dharma artifacts landed on purple? Yi. Intersection Shi. Waving Xim Pi to kidnap Mianhuan hashtag? Genesis. Vulgar. Yi. Huigui. Many Protoss were originally surrounding Su Zimo. He sensed that above the canyon purple? Yi. Yi. Blowing in? Huang Hui. Vanadium Zhu. Bin. Dian Bien. Bien Bien. Primordial God. He. Mimu Jidan. Ya. 1 CMO. You still. 1 CMO. Shui Xim Pai Tong God. Chao Lu Fan. CMO Qian. Actually the so-called abnormality was just this purple. Na CMO. Fujidan. E. The stone was the size of a goose egg and as black as ink. From above the canyon, it fell towards Su Zimo. Su Zimo swept his gaze over and was slightly stunned. For some reason, this stone gave him a feeling of déjà vu. This stone was too common. Not to mention Kunlun ruins, it could be seen everywhere on Tianhuang mainland. However, the moment Su Zimo saw the stone, an indescribable feeling arose in his heart. He instinctively reached out and caught the stone. However, just as he touched the stone, it suddenly disappeared. It was as if it had entered his body through his palm. This feeling, Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat. He suddenly recalled the illumination stone that he picked up when he first met Master Extreme Fire in Songlang Mountain Range. The two situations were almost the same. Suddenly, Su Zimo felt a sharp pain in his mind. Yes, Su Zimo groaned and lowered his head slightly. His whole body was curled up and trembling. The Protoss didn't know what had happened to Su Zimo, but this was the best time for them to strike. The leading Protoss half-martial ancestor widened his golden eyes. His divine eyes were focused and ready to attack. Now that he saw such an opportunity, he immediately unleashed his godly eye technique without hesitation. He was not the only one who had such a reaction. The Protoss in the Army of Light were all prodigies and monsters. Sensing this rare opportunity, they all attacked. One after another, ocular techniques tore through the air. In an instant, hundreds of golden lights crossed the void and shot toward Su Zimo. Most of the golden light was aimed at Su Zimo's head. Some of them were aimed at Su Zimo's vital points. A small portion of the golden light was aimed at Su Zimo's surroundings, sealing off all the space he could dodge. More than 500 Protoss attacked and unleashed their godly eye techniques. Rays of golden light formed an impenetrable net that enveloped Su Zimo. The eruption of an eye technique was instantaneous to begin with. It was very difficult to dodge. Moreover, Su Zimo was standing on the spot with his head lowered. He didn't move at all, as if he couldn't sense the danger at all. Suddenly, the moment the golden lights descended, Su Zimo raised his head abruptly. There was no white in his left eye at all. It was pitch black. It didn't seem to be an eye. Instead, it was an endless dark abyss that emitted a chilling aura. It seemed to be the eye of a demon god. All the golden light descending on Su Zimo seemed to be frozen and froze in mid-air. A trace of frost appeared on the golden light. Boom, boom, boom. Suddenly, the thousands of golden lights shattered and turned into nothingness. The power of the pitch-black eye was reflected back. The expressions of the Protoss changed. They felt that their eyes were invaded by an extremely chilling power, and they couldn't move their eyeballs. Their gazes were all frozen in his eyes. The next moment they couldn't see at all. Cracks appeared in the eyes of the gods, and turned into ice crystals that flowed out of their eye sockets. It was terrifying. The gods' eyes were blind. Some Protoss and half-martial ancestors relied on the divine power contained in their godly eye to protect their eyes. However, the eyes of these Protoss and half-martial ancestors were also in unbearable pain, and tears kept flowing out of them. Ah, ah, ah. The gods panicked and let out a series of screams. Nether fluorescent eye. Is it that god from back then? Aojiji? One of the Protoss demi-ancestor seemed to have thought of something. Deep fear flashed through his eyes, and his voice trembled slightly. At that instant, the darkness in Su Zimo's left eye gradually disappeared and returned to normal, as if nothing had happened. Back at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley, when the red-headed ghost imparted the Illumination Dragon eye to Su Zimo, he had mentioned the legends of illumination and nether glow. Su Zimo did not expect that the inconspicuous pitch-black stone was actually a fluorescent stone. The illumination stone and the nether fluorite were both in the Kunlun ruins. The candlelight sword formation in the candlelight stone was actually left behind by Fairy Linglong back then. It was placed in the Linglong mystic realm, and was later accidentally brought to Tianhuang region by extreme fire. And within this nether fluorescent stone, there was also a secret technique. Was this the same purple from back then? Don't I? Oink. Scratch. When this serene fluorite entered Su Zimo's left eye, the eye technique of the serene fluorite had already entered Su Zimo's mind. In such a short period of time, Su Zimo naturally couldn't cultivate this eye technique. Just now, it was only because the god's eyes of the gods had stimulated the serene fluorescent stone and caused it to counterattack. Su Zimo's Qinglian true body did not have any powerful eye techniques. Now that he had obtained this nether fluorescent stone, it could be considered as making up for this flaw. The might of a primordial taboo ocular technique could be imagined. It was as if everything was arranged by fate. God, Yao Yu Gray Ya? Shantao Clam? Piao 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 Piao? Windowsill, Zhao Yu, Badger Nan Lu Nai. Su Zimo turned around and looked at the top of the canyon, at the god who stood with his back to heaven wasteland. Yi? Gully New Frostbite Course? Wrong. Could it be that the bones were broken, and the ammonia was cracked? Judge Model? Bowing? Chongxing Meng Piao Luo Jima. Su Zimo suddenly turned around and charged into the crowd of the Army of Light again, erupting with a fierce attack. The gods were blinded. They only needed to recuperate for a little while to regrow their vision. However, Su Zimo did not give them the chance at all. His attacks were fierce, ruthless, and decisive. In 2 or 3 rounds, he would definitely be able to kill a Protoss. In close combat, even a Protoss half-martial ancestor could not stop Qinglian true body. One by one the Protoss fell, never to stand up again. This scene was just like the primordial era. These Protoss were forever buried in this canyon. The number of Protoss knights was rapidly decreasing. More than 400. More than 300. The Army of Light, which originally had more than 1,000 people, was only left with 200 people by Su Zimo. At this moment, terrifying auras burst out from the 5-colored cave again. A dark and cold energy entered the Kunlun ruins. Protoss walked in one after another. These Protoss also had blonde hair and blue eyes, but they did not have armor on their bodies. Instead, they wore black robes and did not have mounts under their feet. They held crystalline staffs in their hands. When these Protoss entered the canyon, it was as if a pitch-black cloud was surging over. The Dark Army had arrived. Chapter 1523. The Protoss leader of the Darkness Army was a middle-aged man with a gloomy expression. He had short hair, a thin face, and sharp eyes. He held a staff and waved it slowly in front of him. The many black-robed Protoss behind him also waved their staffs. Streaks of pitch-black mist filled the air like billowing thick smoke that contained dark and icy cold energy, enveloped the profound magnet mountain. The sky darkened instantly. It was as if the world was shrouded in darkness. The temperature plummeted. In the blink of an eye, the mystic magnet mountain was enveloped by the black fog. Su Zimo frowned slightly. Darkness descended. He had already lost control of the mystic magnet mountain. However, he could clearly feel that the mystic magnet mountain's power was rapidly weakening under the black fog. Everyone, the Darkness Army is here. The Protoss leader shouted. Put on your armor. Take out your weapons and shatter this mountain. Let's kill our way out. The remaining 200-odd Protoss were invigorated. Although some of the Protoss knights' eyes had yet to recover, they took out their armor, swords, and shields from their storage bags, and used their powerful divine senses to launch a fierce counterattack. The swords and shields of these Protoss were extremely strong and hard. Even the spellbreaker bow could not penetrate them. Even Su Zimo's Qinglian true form did not dare to face them head-on. These Protoss were wearing armor and holding swords and shields. They quickly formed an airtight defensive formation and blocked Su Zimo outside. In all fairness, if not for the Mystic Magnet Mountain and the Spellbreaker Bow, Su Zimo would not have been able to withstand the power of the entire light army, despite his monstrous combat strength. Now the Darkness Army had descended. Su Zimo was about to face a tough battle. Su Zimo retreated and temporarily distanced himself from the remaining light army. He swallowed another spirit pill and slowly recovered his strength. Just now in this battle, Su Zimo had fought many Protoss in close combat. Under the nourishment of the Creation Lotus platform and the spirit pill, his essence spirit had recovered nearly 70%. This was the terrifying self-healing ability of Qinglian true form, and also one of the miraculous manifestations of Qinglian creation. If Su Zimo took out the Spellbreaker Bow now, he could shoot hundreds of magic power arrows again. Boom, boom, boom. After the light army forced Su Zimo back, they did not continue to advance toward the Kunlun ruins. Instead, they turned around and continuously attacked the Mystic Magnet Mountain. This sort of action originated from fear towards the profound Magnet Mountain, and also from anger towards it. Every divine knight in the Army of Light couldn't forget the fact that they were treated as live targets under the cover of this mountain. They fell down one by one, but they couldn't do anything about it. Although the Dark Army had taken action, the gods were still worried. Moreover, they wanted to vent the anger in their hearts. Deep in the hearts of the 200-odd Protoss knights, they no longer dared to attack Su Zimo. They could only charge at the Mystic Magnet Mountain. Behind the Mystic Magnet Mountain, the Protoss commander of the Dark Army gave the order. Many Protoss waved their staffs and condensed dark spears, throwing them at the Mystic Magnet Mountain. The two extreme powers of light and darkness erupted on the Mystic Magnet Mountain. Boom! The earth shook and the mountains shook. It was deafening. This power represented the peak of the continent of gods, enough to destroy the world. Su Zimo's gaze focused. He clearly saw that numerous cracks had appeared on the 3,000-meter-tall body of the profound Magnet Mountain, and they were expanding and spreading bit by bit. The Mystic Magnet Mountain shattered. This ancient treasure was still unable to withstand the impact of the Protoss civilization, and was destroyed in the God-slaying canyon. However, this ancient treasure had already completed its mission. It was precisely because of its existence that the Light Army was defeated by Su Zimo. Rumble! The Mystic Magnet Mountain collapsed. Countless gravel rolled down and collapsed, and dust billowed. The God-slaying canyon was reopened. The remaining 200-odd Protoss of the Light Army rushed toward the Dark Army, as if they were fleeing for their lives. How did this happen? Asked the Dark Army commander with a frown. That person, a Protoss knight, pointed at Su Zimo, who was not far away in the canyon. He swallowed his saliva and said, "That person is blocking us. We can't go through." Only one person? The Dark Army commander frowned even more deeply as he asked in disbelief. Yes. The Protoss knight recalled the scene that had happened just now and still had lingering fear. He said, although he's alone, but... Huh? The Dark Army commander suddenly laughed and asked somewhat mockingly, "And he's a human?" The Protoss knight was speechless. The Dark Army commander snorted coldly. "Your Light Army is getting worse and worse. You're actually blocked in the canyon by a lowly and weak human. This is a disgrace to us Protoss. Everyone follow me. Let's kill this human," said the Dark Army commander with a cold expression. He led the many black-robed Protoss behind him, and slowly walked toward Su Zimo. After pausing for a while, the Dark Army commander looked sideways at the pale and frightened Protoss knights and sneered. "As for you guys, slowly heal here. If you're really scared, scram back to the continent of gods. Don't embarrass the Protoss. You." The many Protoss Knights of the Light Army widened their eyes in anger. The Divine Race commander of the Radiance Army wore a gloomy face. He waved his hand and said, "There's no need to argue. The enemy is right in front of us. The two great armies of the Divine Race can't fight among themselves. Your Dark Army should be careful." Ha ha. The Dark Army commander curled his lips and sneered. "It's just a human. What kind of enemy is he?" The Light Protoss commander wanted to say something but stopped. He wanted to remind the Dark Army commander that the human had a bow with terrifying killing power. But on second thought, that human must have used up a lot of energy to pull that bow. He shouldn't have much strength left. Moreover, the Dark Army commander's mockery made him a little unhappy. He snorted and didn't say anything else. "Human ant, I'll send you to hell." The Dark Army commander waved the staff in his hand, and black fog spread out. The black-robed Protoss behind him also waved their staffs, and chanted many strange characters and syllables. The black fog fell into the God-slaying canyon, and a terrifying scene happened. The Protoss Knights of the Light Army that had just fallen stood up one by one. Some Protoss Knights even lost their heads. Some Protoss Knights had lost their arms. Some of the Divine Knights had lost half of their bodies, but they were still able to stand up, trembling. But these Protoss Knights, shrouded in black fog, seemed to come alive. They turned around and stared at Su Zimo. Their eyes were pitch black, and they emitted a powerful aura. The Protoss Knights climbed up from the pool of blood and corpses one after another. Su Zimo's expression was solemn. He could feel that these Protoss Knights had already fallen. There was no life aura or fluctuation in their bodies. The resurrection of these Protoss Knights was only summoned and controlled by these black-robed Protoss, with some mysterious power. Indeed, Su Zimo had never heard of or seen such a strange method before. Chapter 1524. Su Zimo's expression did not change. Although he was unfamiliar with the Protoss's methods, there were thousands of spells and 3,000 great Daos, and they all had similarities. Placing his palms together, Su Zimo lowered his head and chanted a long paragraph of obscure sutras in Sanskrit. Emo. Jie. The Sanskrit contained a profound and mysterious power. Su Zimo's body was also gradually covered with a layer of sacred Buddhist light. His entire person became dignified, and his aura was transcendent. Great Light Mantra, Hearing Liberation Mantra, Great Enlightenment Mantra, Six Vajra Mantra. These four mantras did not have much attack power. They were only used by Buddhists to release the souls of the dead and relieve resentment. Many Protoss Knights came back from the dead, wearing armor and holding swords and shields. Even if Su Zimo fought head-on and suppressed these Protoss Knights, they would rise again. Unless they were smashed to pieces, they were almost immortal under the secret techniques of the black-robed Protoss. However, if the Buddhist mantra was used to expel the dark power in these Protoss Knights, these Protoss Knights would naturally fall silent again. This was a confrontation between two cultivation civilizations. The Dark Army commander frowned slightly as he looked at the scene in the canyon. A look of surprise flashed across his eyes. The Protoss Knights that came back from the dead were originally emitting monstrous killing intent. They gathered together again and prepared to charge at Su Zimo. However, after these four mantras descended, the black fog in the eyes of these Protoss Knights gradually dissipated. After losing this dark power, these Protoss Knights that came back from the dead collapsed again. Interesting. The Dark Army commander smiled and said, "I didn't expect a human ant like you to have some tricks up your sleeve. However, if you want to fight against my Dark Army with your own strength, that's a fool's dream." The Dark Army commander waved his staff. Streaks of black fog emerged from the staff again. The many black-robed Protoss in the Dark Army also began to augment their magic power. Streaks of dark power descended and contended against Su Zimo's Buddhist secret incantation. The power of darkness was endless. This was not a one-on-one fight. Just as the Dark Army commander had said, Su Zimo alone could not withstand the power of the entire Dark Army. The secret Buddhist incantations were indeed effective against the dark forces controlled by the Protoss. But the Dark Army had over 1,000 people. The eruption of the dark energy was too powerful. Su Zimo's Buddhist secret incantation was soon unable to hold on under this unending stream of dark energy. The Protoss knight that had fallen was about to rise from the ashes. A cold light flashed in Su Zimo's eyes. If this continued, the one who would be defeated would definitely be him. Instead of fighting a war of attrition with the Dark Army, it was better to take drastic measures and directly kill the Protoss of the Dark Army, cutting off the source of the Dark Army's power. At this thought, Su Zimo patted his storage bag and took out a jade green bow. It was an ancient treasure, the Spellbreaker bow. In the distance, the Light Army commander's expression changed when he saw the Spellbreaker bow. He hurriedly shouted, "Be careful of that bow." Haha. The Dark Army commander sneered. "It's just a broken bow. Even if this bow is powerful, how many people can it kill in my army?" The way he saw it, the time it took for the bow to fire an arrow was enough for him to attack and kill this human 10 times, no 100 times. Whoosh! Su Zimo did not say a word. He drew the bow and formed an arrow. A magic power arrow pierced through the air and arrived in front of the Dark Army commander in an instant. Shield of Darkness. The Dark Army commander did not move. He waved his staff unhurriedly, and a huge pitch-black shield quickly formed in front of him. He was confident that this shield of darkness could block all attacks below the Mahayana realm. Furthermore, his opponent was merely a mighty figure of the human race. He did not notice that there was a look of mockery in Su Zimo's eyes at that moment. The Spellbreaker bow could break all skills with a single arrow. All Dermic arts were nothing in the face of the Spellbreaker bow. What was even more frightening was that the Dermic power arrow released by the Spellbreaker bow could not only break through skills, it could also absorb Dermic powers to strengthen itself. In other words, the stronger the Dermic power of the Dark Army commander's Shield of Darkness, the more terrifying the power of the Dermic power arrow was, the more terrifying it would be. Poof! When the Dermic power arrow struck the Shield of Darkness, there was no earth-shattering sound. Instead, it seemed as though it had pierced through flesh. The pupils of the Dark Army commander constricted. Right in front of him, the Shield of Darkness was pierced by the Dermic power arrow in the blink of an eye. Furthermore, all the Dermic powers of the Shield of Darkness were absorbed by the Dermic power arrow. This magic power arrow became as black as ink and thickened by a large circle. It was no longer an arrow. It was a gigantic pitch-black spear. Back then, Su Zimo knew nothing about the Spellbreaker bow. When the Dermic power arrow pierced through Qinglian's true body, the Dark Army commander could not dodge it either. It was too close. When the Dermic power arrow broke through the Shield of Darkness and transformed into a pitch-black spear, it had already pierced his chest. Poof! Blood gushed out. The Dark Army commander's eyes widened. He lowered his head slightly and looked at the bloody hole in his chest that was as thick as an arm. His eyes were filled with disbelief. The pitch-black spear directly pierced through his body. The terrifying power almost tore his body apart. Fortunately, he was a half-ancestor powerhouse among the Protoss. His bloodline was powerful and condensed, so he was able to resist the terrifying power of the pitch-black spear and protect his body. Even so, his internal organs had already been shattered. If the Dark Army commander was already like this, then the black-robed Protoss behind him were even more miserable. The black spear pierced through the Dark Army commander's body. Its power was not exhausted. It pierced through 5 black-robed Protoss in a row before it stopped, and the Dermic power dissipated. Bang! 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 The bodies of the 5 black-robed Protoss exploded one after another, turning into clouds of blood mist. The primordial spirits of the 5 black-robed Protoss were shattered by the black spear. Not even their bones were left. Their bodies and souls were destroyed, and they died on the spot. When facing the Light Army, even with the help of the Mystic Magnet Mountain, one Dermic power arrow could only kill one Protoss knight at most. However, the Dermic breaker bow was almost destructive to the Protoss of the Dark Army. How could this be? The Dark Army commander's eyes were somewhat confused. The warning of the Light Army commander seemed to be echoing in his ears. Be careful of that bow. Whoosh! The second arrow descended. The Dark Army commander was heavily injured. Before he could react, under the gaze of many Protoss, the second Dermic power arrow pierced through his head and destroyed his primordial spirit. The Dark Army commander had fallen. This dermic power arrow's power was not exhausted. It shot toward another black-robed Protoss. This black-robed Protoss subconsciously condensed a dermic power, and a pitch-black spear appeared in front of him. He wanted to meet the attack with attack, and block the dermic power arrow. However, his spear was absorbed by the dermic power arrow in the blink of an eye. Poof! The dermic power arrow's power became even more powerful and violent, directly killing this person on the spot. Chapter 1525. Whoosh! 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 Magical power arrows pierced through the air and shot into the Dark Army. Every magic power arrow could cause great damage. It could kill at least 3 or 4 people before it dissipated and stopped. At first, the Protoss of the Dark Army kept condensing spells to resist. However, they soon discovered that the spells they released were completely useless in front of the long arrows that were shot over. No matter how powerful the spells were, they would be broken by the arrows. Moreover, the magical power from the dissipated spells would be absorbed by the arrows to strengthen their power and cause greater damage. Before this, the Army of Light had been falling one by one under the Spellbreaker bow. Now, with the sound of the Spellbreaker bow, the Dark Army fell one by one. Without the protection of armor, the Protoss of the Dark Army suffered heavy casualties under the Spellbreaker bow. In the blink of an eye, Su Zimo had shot hundreds of arrows, and the Dark Army only had 400 Protoss left. These Protoss fled as if they had gone mad. They were in an even worse state than the Army of Light just now. The remaining 200 Protoss of the Army of Light also hurriedly stepped forward. Many Protoss knights set up giant golden shields in front of them, forming an impenetrable defense to protect the Dark Army behind them. Clang! 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 The magical power arrows hit these giant golden shields and exploded with a loud bang. Sparks flew everywhere, and the Army of Light's formation was in chaos. Don't panic, people. As long as we work together and our formation is not messed up, we can definitely block the Saraki Takeshi's arrows. Under the command of the Light Protoss commander, the Army of Light quickly stabilized their formation. Although the Army of Light only had 200 people left, they relied on the indestructible giant golden shields to form a defensive formation. Su Zimo's Spellbreaker bow could not penetrate their defense. Where did this human come from? How can he be so powerful? A black-robed Protoss who had escaped asked with lingering fear. I heard that his name is Araki Takeshi. We don't know anything else. A Protoss knight coldly replied. Another Protoss knight couldn't help but mock. Wasn't the Dark Army just now very arrogant? Why are you so scared now? This human is nothing. It's just that his bow is too scary. A black-robed Protoss hurriedly explained. However, this explanation seemed extremely weak, and it even caused a wave of ridicule. Enough! The Radiant Protoss commander shouted. Our Radiant Corps will block this human's attack from the front. Your Dark Corps will attack from the back. Our 2 corps will cooperate and slowly push forward. Normally speaking, when the godly continent invaded other continents, the 2 armies would work together to advance, and it would be successful. But this colorful cave was occupied by an ancient god? Han al-Shua. Jean Lumiao frowned. Lin? Invading the desolate lands and embracing each other happily? Now, under the command of the Radiance Army's commander, the 2 armies slowly advanced in the direction of the god-butchering canyon. Su Zimo frowned slightly. The Army of Light raised their giant golden shields in front of them, protecting him and the Dark Army behind them. This made him feel like he did not know where to start. Even the exorcism bow couldn't penetrate the Radiant Corps' defense. Up till this point of his cultivation, Su Zimo had experienced countless battles. However, he had never experienced such a difficult feeling before. However, he thought of the 2 gods standing proudly on both sides of the canyon. Yi, Cha, thinking of Night Spirit, Extreme Fire, Nian Qi, and the others behind him. A sense of heroism rose in his heart. His gaze became more determined, and his killing intent was about to burst out. Facing the 2 slowly advancing armies, Su Zimo stepped into the air and actually walked toward them. With every step he took, his killing intent increased by a bit. The sky changed color. A vast starry sky appeared in the sky above the God-butchering canyon. However, all the stars in this starry sky seemed to be affected by something. Their trajectories were chaotic, and some stars even collided with each other, causing the entire sky to tremble. Killing intent soared into the sky, disrupting the void. Just as Suzimo's killing intent was about to condense into substance, a star in the sky actually fell and smashed toward the two armies. Boom! An earth-shattering boom rang out. The power that erupted from the falling star was incomparably terrifying. Even if more than 200 Protoss Knights joined forces, they couldn't withstand the impact. One golden shield after another was smashed away by this falling star. Many Protoss Knights were sent flying. However, these Protoss Knights were still wearing heavy armor. Even if they suffered such an impact, they were fine and quickly stood up. Meanwhile, the Dark Core was almost unscathed under the protection of the Radiant Core. At this moment, Suzimo's eyes shone brightly. He turned into a golden light and rushed over, crashing into the middle of the two armies. Suzimo condensed sword fingers, and dazzling sword energy burst out from his body. Chi! Chi! It wasn't one but two sword energies. It wasn't 100 but 1,000. It wasn't 10,000 either. After absorbing and refining the worryless wood, Suzimo's power of essence spirit increased, and his comprehension of the heaven-slaying sword art deepened. If he released it at full strength, he could release as many as 108,000 sword chi in an instant. This kind of explosion was almost at the level of destruction. The three great ancient sword techniques represented the Tao of killing. 108,000 swords was almost the pinnacle of killing. Even a dermic breaker, Bao would find it difficult to break through the armor of the Protoss Knights. However, the heaven-slaying sword chi was different. 108,000 sword chi were released densely, blotting out the skies and penetrating every orifice. Even though the Protoss Knights were wearing armor, it wasn't flawless. Although the armor could withstand most of the sword chi, as long as one or two sword chi entered their bodies through the gaps in the armor, it would be enough to cause severe injuries to the Protoss. If the heaven-slaying sword chi entered their consciousness, even the half-martial ancestor experts of the Protoss could only die. Clang! 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 The sound of the heaven-slaying sword chi striking the Pantheon armor echoed. But after the 108,000 sword chis burst out, even more Celestials were riddled with holes. They didn't even have the chance to escape before they died. Some Protoss hid behind the gigantic golden shield and escaped by chance. The gigantic golden shield was also pierced by the heaven-slaying sword chi and was completely crippled. Suzimo stood in the middle of the valley, stepping on the corpses of the gods and panting slightly. The release of the heaven-slaying sword art this time round had almost exhausted his dermic powers, and his essence spirit was extremely weak as well. A hint of exhaustion could be seen between his brows. However, around him were the corpses of Protoss and blood flowed like rivers. All the Protoss of the Darkness army were dead without a single survivor. There were still more than 10 Protoss left in the Light army, and they were completely scared out of their wits. Covered in wounds, they looked at Suzimo with endless fear in their eyes. Two armies were almost completely wiped out. How could this be done by humans? This was practically a miracle. End of chapter. Chapter 1526. It's over. Suzimo looked at the dozens of Protoss not far away and said coldly with an indifferent expression. Although these dozen or so celestial race experts were half-martial ancestors, they managed to survive by relying on their bloodline and fleshly body, as well as the divine ability they had comprehended and the huge shield they were wearing. However, they were already covered in wounds. More importantly, the half-martial ancestors of the Protoss were completely scared out of their wits. The initial arrogance in their eyes was no longer there, only endless fear. All of a sudden, an even more violent fluctuation came from the direction of the Rainbow Cave, as though a terrifying existence was about to charge out of the cave. The fluctuation coming from the Rainbow Cave this time round was even more terrifying than the two armies of the Protoss. There's more. Suzimo's expression changed starkly. Up till this point of the battle, he had destroyed two armies and used all his means. His essence spirit, blood chi and dermic powers were almost exhausted to their limits. If the Protoss had any other trump cards, he would truly not be able to defend against them. It was only at this moment that Su Zimo truly understood. Taboo gods of the primordial era? Thunder Academy song proficient in resistance? Major. Selection of Ma'i liquid diagram in the primordial era. Countless Protoss experts entered Kunlun. Among them, there were Mahayana patriarchs and emperors. There was an endless stream. But now, the Protoss only had 2 armies without a single ancestor realm expert. Yet, he was already exhausted. Su Zimo stared at the rainbow cave and swallowed another bunch of elixirs. Creation Qinglian spewed out rays of light that nourished his essence spirit continuously. In fact, he did not even waste time and energy to kill the dozens of Protoss not far away. An even more difficult and dangerous battle was yet to come. Finally, the rainbow cave shone brightly and a massive creature flew out. Su Zimo's gaze focused. It was a gigantic demon beast that was pitch black and hundreds of feet long. Its body was covered in thick and rough scales, and there was a pair of wings on its back. Every time it flapped, it would cause a tornado. This demonic beast had the head of a dragon. Its eyes were ferocious and cold, and its claws and teeth were sharp. However, its body was like a huge lizard. It looked rather strange, and was filled with a violent aura. Ha 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 ha. A Protoss half-ancestor suddenly laughed and said loudly, "Araki Takeshi, you're finished. Our godly continent's half-martial ancestor dragon rider has arrived." Su Zimo had seen this kind of demon beast in the pictures on the walls of the palace. It seemed to be the dragons of the godly continent. This black dragon emitted a dense demonic aura. It was actually a half-martial ancestor expert. On the back of the black dragon stood a figure with a spear in his hand. His entire body shone with a blazing golden light, like a blazing sun with a wanton might. Su Zimo could sense that this so-called half-martial ancestor dragon rider was even stronger than the commanders of the 2 armies from before. This was a half-martial ancestor expert who could subdue a divine dragon. And, on the back of the black dragon, the half-martial ancestor dragon rider's voice sounded, filled with endless majesty. "You killed my people. I'll trample Tianhuang mainland and kill billions of humans to pay tribute to those who died." Fufu. Su Zimo laughed and said, "Trample Tianhuang mainland? You'll have to get past me first." Facing the powerful half-martial ancestor dragon rider, Su Zimo took a deep breath. With a determined gaze, he leaped up and charged toward the half-martial ancestor dragon rider. No matter what kind of experts came from the godly continent, he would not take half a step back. Judgment Spear. The half-martial ancestor dragon rider stood on the black dragon and pointed his spear in Su Zimo's direction across the void. A resplendent spear condensed in midair and shot toward Su Zimo at an astonishing speed. This dermic art was too powerful. Before the judgment spear descended, Su Zimo felt a sharp pain on his face. Even Qinglian's true body could not withstand this dermic art. Without hesitation, Su Zimo flipped his palm and summoned the spellbreaker bow, knocking an arrow. Buzz! The bowstring trembled. The dermic power arrow shot out and collided with the judgment spear. The incomparably powerful dermic art dissipated instantly, and all the dermic powers were absorbed by the dermic power arrow. The power of the dermic power arrow increased exponentially and expanded, transforming into an even more terrifying judgment spear that shot towards the half-martial ancestor dragon rider. The half-martial ancestor dragon rider's expression did not change. The black dragon beneath him flapped its wings and roared, reaching out with a pair of dragon claws to grab the judgment spear. However, the judgment spear was the burst power of the spellbreaker bow and was fused with the power of the half-martial ancestor dragon rider. Even the black dragon could not defend against it. The judgment spear streaked across the black dragon's palm and let out a strange sound. The black dragon's claws were scraped until they were dripping with blood. Boom! Right then, a golden beam of light descended and collided with the judgment spear, causing a deafening sound. The judgment spear shattered and dissipated on the spot, turning into nothingness. It was the half-martial ancestor dragons who had attacked and blocked the judgment spear with the spear in his hands. Very strong. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat. This half-martial ancestor dragon rider was even more troublesome than the two armies just now. Interesting. The half-martial ancestor dragon rider smiled gently and said, "To think that your bow can break my dermic art and absorb my dermic powers to strengthen itself." The half-martial ancestor dragon rider's eyesight was extremely brilliant as well. He had never seen the spellbreaker bow before. However, he managed to see through its secret in a single round. However, as dragon riders, we're not only good at dermic arts, but also melee combat. The half-martial ancestor dragon rider shouted softly, "Kill!" With that order, the black dragon flapped its wings, and a gust of wind howled as it charged towards Su Zimo aggressively. The black dragon opened its mouth, wanting to devour Su Zimo. "Fight!" Su Zimo shouted, and his glabella shone as a green light burst forth. The creation lotus platform descended from the skies and smashed towards the black dragon's head. Clang! The half-martial ancestor dragon rider raised his spear and blocked the creation Qinglian. The black dragon continued to devour, and a huge shadow appeared above Su Zimo's head, blotting out the sky. Su Zimo's figure flashed and turned into a golden beam of light, escaping from the black dragon's mouth by a hair's breadth. Piak! The black dragon's mouth closed, and its teeth rubbed against each other, letting out a horrifying sound. Su Zimo was secretly speechless. Even the creation Qinglian might not be able to withstand the terrifying bite of the black dragon. The half-martial ancestor dragon rider's spear descended once more. Su Zimo wielded the creation Qinglian and took it head-on. Bang! Su Zimo retreated with a pale face. The half-martial ancestor dragon rider was extremely strong. If Su Zimo was in his peak condition, it would not be a problem for him to fight against the half-martial ancestor dragon rider. But now, his essence spirit, blood chi and blood were weak, and his combat strength was greatly reduced. He was actually disadvantaged against the half-martial ancestor dragon rider. Furthermore, the half-martial ancestor dragon rider was not alone. He had the help of a half-martial ancestor divine dragon. Right then, a commotion came from the five-colored cave once more. Another behemoth rushed out from within with a murderous aura and a surging dragon might, roaring. There was more than one half-martial ancestor dragon rider. A second half-martial ancestor dragon rider had arrived in Kunlun. End of chapter. Chapter 1527. Ant. The first half-martial ancestor shouted, "You won't be able to defend against the conquest of the Protoss." "Is that so?" Su Zimo's expression was cold. Before the second half-martial ancestor arrived, he touched his glabella with his fingertip and pulled out a lightning whip from his consciousness. It was the essence spirit secret skill of the Thunder Emperor, the spirit vanquishing whip. Piak! Su Zimo swung the whip and whipped it towards the half-martial ancestor not far away. The half-martial ancestor's expression changed slightly. A fight between essence spirits was the most dangerous. He had not expected that the human would release an essence spirit secret skill the moment he arrived. Furthermore, the aura emitted by the lightning whip made his heart skip a beat. The half-martial ancestor dragons did not dare to be careless, and hurriedly released his essence spirit secret skill as well. The black dragon beneath him conjured an essence spirit secret skill as well. The two essence spirit secret skills collided against the spirit vanquishing whip. Bolts of lightning flickered in the air, crackling chaotically. Although the spirit vanquishing whip was strong, it gradually dissipated against the essence spirit secret skills of the two half-martial ancestors. Fufu. The first half-martial ancestor had a mocking expression as he sneered. "That's all you've got?" Before the smile on his face disappeared, it froze and his expression changed starkly. Amidst the dissipating lightning, a green sword aura flashed and slashed towards the center of his eyebrows, arriving before him in an instant. Su Zimo did not only release the spirit vanquishing whip, there was also a killing technique that targeted the essence spirit Qinglian's sword. The half-martial ancestor widened his eyes and hurriedly channeled his spirit consciousness once more, releasing a terrifying spirit consciousness in an attempt to block Qinglian's sword. A green light flashed. Qinglian's sword split the spirit consciousness released by the half-martial ancestor dragons into two and entered his glabella. A single slash destroyed his essence spirit. The half-martial ancestor dragon was clad in armor and was unscathed. However, his life force drained rapidly and his gaze dimmed. His head tilted, and he fell from the black dragon's body. This was the danger of a battle between essence spirits. The slightest carelessness would result in the destruction of one's primordial spirit and the dissipation of one's Tao. The reason why Su Zimo was able to kill this half-martial ancestor dragons was not only because of the power of the deity-slaying whip and the Qinglian sword, but more importantly, because this half-martial ancestor dragons knew nothing about Su Zimo. In addition, this person had looked down on Su Zimo, resulting in such an outcome. Roar! The black dragon sensed the death of its master and let out a furious roar. It charged toward Su Zimo, as if it had gone mad. The second dragon rider half-martial ancestor had also arrived. This was equivalent to 3 half-martial ancestor realm experts, simultaneously launching a ferocious attack against Su Zimo, who was like an arrow at the end of its flight. Bang! Su Zimo relied on his movement technique to dodge, but in the end, he was still a little too slow. The long spear swept across his chest, and he was directly sent flying. A chunk of his thigh had also been bitten off by the black dragon. Blood was dripping from his thigh. Bang! Su Zimo fell heavily to the ground, his tendons and bones on the verge of cracking. Right then, a commotion occurred in the Rainbow Cave once more. A third half-martial ancestor dragon rider charged out. Su Zimo struggled to stand up and his heart sank. He could not block it anymore. The continent of gods was far stronger than he had imagined. At that moment, the dragon phoenix's true body was cultivating in seclusion in the ancestral land of the dragons. Even he could not sense it, nor could he establish any connection with it. Right now, he could only summon Wu Dao's true body. However, even if he alarmed Wu Dao's true body now, it was already too late. It would take at least a few days for Wu Dao's true body to arrive at Kunlun ruins. By then, the Protoss would have already flattened Kunlun ruins and entered Tianhuang mainland. "Aunt, you killed my master. I'll let you have a taste of the wrath of us dragons." The black dragon spoke in human language and glared at Su Zimo with ferocious eyes as black and sticky dragon saliva flowed from the corner of its mouth. Suddenly, the black dragon opened its mouth and spat out a terrifying black flame from the depths of its throat, sweeping towards Su Zimo. If it was any other time, Su Zimo would have countless methods to deal with it. He could definitely pull open the spirit breaker bow and break the black flame with an arrow. However, at that moment, he did not even have the strength to pull open the spirit breaker bow. Just as the flame was about to descend on Su Zimo, a gigantic ghostly figure suddenly appeared beside the black dragon. The gigantic demon beast extended a pair of sharp claws and grabbed the black dragon's neck. The sharp claws pierced through the scales on the black dragon's body and almost snapped its thick neck. Blood spewed out. The demon beast opened its mouth and bit down on the black dragon's head. Crack! Instantly, the black dragon's head was crushed by the terrifying demon beast. Before the black flame could descend on Su Zimo, it was extinguished rapidly and dissipated in midair. The half-martial ancestor black dragon was bitten to death. The gigantic dragon's head was bitten into a pulp and was unrecognizable. The black dragon died in a tragic manner, and its massive body fell from midair. When he saw that, Su Zimo was invigorated. It was Night Spirit. Night Spirit had rushed over. Roar! Night Spirit opened its mouth and bared its menacing fangs. It charged towards the other 2 dragon riders and let out a deafening roar. The 2 half-martial ancestors of the dragons were still able to maintain their composure. However, the black dragons beneath them were so frightened that they trembled all over and almost fell from the sky. Their eyes were filled with endless fear. Against a god? Could it be a worm? Could it be a worm? Could it be a pride turtle? Although Night Spirit was covered in injuries, it was still majestic and exuded a rich killing intent that was incomparably ferocious and intimidating. What kind of dragons are you? You're nothing more than insects with wings. Night Spirit stepped on the black dragon's corpse with a murderous aura. Right then, a 4th dragon rider half-martial ancestor appeared in the Rainbow Cave. Su Zimo had a grim expression. By the looks of it, There were definitely not many half-martial ancestors of the dragons. However, every single half-martial ancestor of the dragons was too strong. Up till this point of the battle, both he and Night Spirit were in terrible states. The 4 Dragon Rider half-martial ancestors were already troublesome for him. However, the 2 of them might not be able to withstand the attacks of the Protoss. Roar! Night Spirit roared once more. Rumble! Right then, an earth-shattering sound came from behind Su Zimo, as though a huge army was galloping over. The ground trembled. Su Zimo subconsciously turned around. Dust billowed in the canyon as countless Kunlun race members rushed over. Their momentum was vast and astonishing. This was even more terrifying than a huge army. This was millions of Kunlun army rushing towards Su Zimo. However, when they arrived in front of Su Zimo, they automatically rushed to the sides, bypassing Su Zimo and charging towards the 4 Dragon Rider half-martial ancestors. At this moment Su Zimo understood. Night Spirit had become the new lord of Kunlun. He led all the Kunlun race members to attack the Protoss. A counterattack from Kunlun. From God? Mimyu Sandworm this time. Night Spirit wasn't protecting Kunlun alone. He had Su Zimo by his side. He had the entire Kunlun race. The addition of the Kunlun army pushed this tragic battle to its limits. Good night, everyone. End of chapter. Chapter 1528. Young Master, how are you? Among the Kunlun army, a blonde girl helped Su Zimo up from the ground and asked with concern. The girl was Nian Qi. I'm fine. Su Zimo took a deep breath and continued to swallow pills. The lotus platform of good fortune was already nourishing his primordial spirit in his sea of consciousness and recovering his magic power. You rest here first. We will go up and fight for a while. Extreme Fire said solemnly. Don't worry. The Kunlun race is already under Night Spirit's command. Although the Protoss is strong, the Kunlun army has tens of millions of people. They can definitely block the Protoss's attack. Extreme Fire was right. As the saying goes, enough ants can bite an elephant to death. The tens of millions of Kunlun army, under the leadership of Night Spirit, formed a huge flood and charged towards the remaining 3 half-martial ancestors. Originally, there were still a dozen heavily injured Protoss knights lying in the canyon. Before these Protoss knights could react, they were drowned by the Kunlun army and trampled into meat paste. Not even their bones were left. Boom! The Kunlun army clashed with the 3 half-martial ancestors, causing a huge explosion. In the instant of the collision, hundreds of Kunlun race died in the hands of the 3 half-martial ancestors. On the battlefield, flesh and blood splattered everywhere. The strength of the 3 half-martial ancestors was too strong. If it was anyone else, they would probably be drowned by the Kunlun army in an instant. However, the 3 half-martial ancestors rode the black dragons and fought with the Kunlun army without retreating half a step. Most of the Kunlun race were killed by the 3 black dragons before they could even reach the half-martial ancestors. The black dragons could not withstand a single blow from Night Spirit. However, against ordinary Kunlun race, they were invincible existences. Whoosh! The 3 black dragons spewed out 3 balls of black flames at the same time, burning towards the Kunlun army. Samadhi Dao Fire. Extreme Fire hollered and conjured hand seals. He channeled the Scarlet Flame Heart Sutra and released the Samadhi Dao Fire, pushing his essence spirit to its limits. In the baptism of this great battle, Extreme Fire was also undergoing a metamorphosis. His Samadhi Dao Fire became even purer and more condensed. Many Kunlun race bigwigs and half-martial ancestors also unleashed their spells. In that instant, a rain of fire descended. The flood rumbled as it collided with the black flames spouted by the 3 black dragons. Magical power surged. The 5-colored cave flickered with brilliance. The 5th Dragon Rider half-martial ancestor had arrived. However, the instant the 5th Dragon Rider half-martial ancestor descended, Night Spirit's figure appeared in the sky. Like a ghost, he suddenly attacked. This half-martial ancestor Long Qi's reaction was also extremely fast. His figure flickered, and he actually dodged Night Spirit's sure-kill attack. Then he raised his spear and stabbed upwards. Clang! The Night Spirit's tail lightly swayed, and a black shadow flashed past, colliding with half-martial ancestor Long Qi's spear, causing sparks to fly everywhere. Kacha, the black dragon beneath half-martial ancestor Long Qi, was unable to escape Night Spirit's pursuit. Its neck was bitten off, causing blood to spurt out. This half-martial ancestor Long Qi was enraged and fought with Night Spirit. Night Spirit's physical strength was also weak, and he was riddled with wounds. The two of them fought, and were surrounded by danger. After paying the price of more than 10 wounds, Night Spirit finally killed the fifth half-martial ancestor Long Qi. Night Spirit took a deep breath, and raised his spirit. He limped towards the other 3 half-martial ancestors. The Kunlun army had a large number of people, but they could only continuously sacrifice their lives to barely block the 3 half-martial ancestors outside the canyon. The strength of the Kunlun army was still unable to threaten the half-martial ancestors who were fully armored. Because of the existence of Night Spirit, the Kunlun army was able to fight against the half-martial ancestors. Soon, the 6th half-martial ancestor Long Qi descended. Not long after, the 7th half-martial ancestor Long Qi appeared. One must know that every half-martial ancestor Long Qi could cause huge damage and impact to the Kunlun army. There was no need for numbers. 10 half-martial ancestors Long Qi could probably scatter tens of millions of Kunlun army. At this time, Su Zimo had recovered a lot of stamina and joined the battle once again. Night Spirit remained hidden in the dark. He did not even need to show himself, and he was already a huge threat to the half-martial ancestors. If Night Spirit did not show himself, the half-martial ancestors present would have to be on guard against him. Night Spirit could also take advantage of this opportunity to rest and heal his injuries while waiting for an opportunity to strike. More and more Kunlun race members died in the canyon. If not for Night Spirit, these Kunlun race members would have already collapsed and fled in all directions. However, with Night Spirit guarding this place and Su Zimo charging at the forefront, these Kunlun race members also forgot about life and death. They continued to fight and roar. Many Kunlun race members had also killed until their eyes turned red. Blood, corpses, broken limbs, broken arms. Everywhere they looked, it was a scene of blood. The Kunlun race suffered heavy casualties and half-martial ancestors Long Qi were also falling. This battle lasted for half a day. The number of Kunlun race warriors that died in the canyon was uncountable. Their blood flowed like a river. As for the Protoss half-martial ancestors Long Qi, they were also killed by Su Zimo, Night Spirit, and many Kunlun race members together. Finally, Night Spirit bit the last black dragon in the canyon to death. He lay on the black dragon's body panting heavily. He almost didn't even have the strength to move. Su Zimo had just killed the last half-martial ancestor Long Qi. In exchange, his sternum was completely broken, and his internal organs were shattered. His organs were bleeding nonstop. Every time he panted, there was a strong smell of blood, and his life aura was weak. His injuries this time were too serious. In his sea of consciousness, even the Creation Lotus platform stopped spinning, and its light dimmed. Even the powerful self-healing ability of the Green Lotus True Body could not heal such a serious injury. Perhaps only the primordial divine spring could heal it. Su Zimo, Night Spirit, Extreme Fire, Nian Qi and many other Kunlun race members were bathed in blood as they looked at the 5-colored cave not far away with nervous expressions. Half an incense stick's time passed. 5 minutes passed. No more Protoss appeared in the 5-colored cave. Was it over? Many Kunlun race members did not look happy. Instead, they looked sorrowful. Countless clansmen who had lived with them for tens of thousands of years had fallen forever and would never stand up again. Although they had defended Kunlun, the price they paid in this battle was too great. Nian Qi lowered his head slightly, not daring to look at the surrounding Kunlun race members or Night Spirit. Although she fought side by side with Su Zimo, Night Spirit and the Kunlun race, the blood of the Protoss flowed in her body after all. The scene in front of her was caused by her clansmen. Nian Qi lowered his head and did not say a word. He had a lot on his mind. Let's go back, Su Zimo said softly. His voice was heavy with exhaustion. Suddenly, before everyone could turn around, Another commotion came from the direction of the five-colored cave. Everyone's expressions changed. At this moment, if any Protoss army appeared, it would definitely be a disaster for them. Another half-martial ancestor dragon rider rushed out of the five-colored cave. This half-martial ancestor dragon rider was clearly different from before. This Protoss was no longer a black dragon, but a pitch-black, fleshless, gigantic bone dragon with sharp bone spikes on its body. This half-martial ancestor dragon rider also wore a black crown on his head. This was the Dragon Rider Commander. The Dragon Rider Commander slowly pulled out a gigantic sword from his storage ring. Black patterns crawled all over this gigantic sword. It was filled with a dark and cold power that was pure to the extreme. The Dragon Rider Commander slowly said, "Ants of Tian Huang, you have annihilated 2 of my god race's legions and numerous dragon riders. Today, I invite out one of the 4 great divine weapons of the god continent, the Sword of Misfortune. Misfortune descends. I represent the continent of gods to launch a divine judgment on you." End of chapter. Chapter 1529. The Dragon Rider Commander activated his divine power, and the black patterns on the Sword of Misfortune became even deeper. Black spiderweb-like power spread out in all directions. The entire world seemed to be enveloped by these black spiderwebs, forming a large black net. Some of the Kunlun race members could not dodge in time, and were infected by these black spiderwebs. Their expressions instantly froze on their faces, and their life auras plummeted, dying in an instant. Under the envelopment of these black spiderwebs, the Kunlun race members fell down one after another. Whether it was the Kunlun race's powerhouses or half-martial ancestors, as long as they were infected by these black spiderwebs, their bodies would be instantly covered with strange black patterns, and they would die on the spot. Even their primordial spirit could not escape, dying with everlasting regret. This is the web of misfortune. Half-martial ancestor dragon rider slowly walked towards Su Zimo and the others, and coldly said, "You are all just prey in this web of misfortune. No one can escape the divine judgment of misfortune." Deep fear appeared in the eyes of the Kunlun race members. Even facing half-martial ancestor dragon rider, these Kunlun race members dared to fight him head-on. But facing this sword of misfortune, this unknown and terrifying power, the Kunlun race finally collapsed. There was nothing that could block this web of misfortune. When magic arts landed on it, they were silently swallowed up, not even causing a single ripple. Even magic treasures that landed on this web of misfortune were dyed with black patterns, and were reduced to scrap. In the blink of an eye, tens of thousands of Kunlun race members fell down forever, never to stand up again. Su Zimo stood at the very front. Black spiderwebs also landed on his Qinglian true body. A strange power flowed through the wounds and entered Qinglian true body. Dark and cold, it destroyed the life force of Qinglian true body. If Qinglian true body was in its peak state, perhaps it could block this web of misfortune. But now, Qinglian true body was already in tatters, and it could not block this strange power at all. The most terrifying thing was that this was not the full power of the Sword of Misfortune. To put it simply, the web of misfortune was nothing more than the aura emitted by the great sword. It was like streams of sword chi. Even so, it was more than enough to wipe out the entire Kunlun race. If the Sword of Misfortune were to fall, who would be able to block it? Even if Su Zimo was in his peak condition, he might not be able to withstand it. The Sword of Misfortune, one of the 4 divine artifacts. He really didn't know what kind of methods the godly continent used, and how much time it took to create such a dark and evil weapon. Su Zimo had used these 2 ancient treasures to almost destroy the Protoss's 2 armies. And now, the Protoss had unleashed one of their 4 divine weapons, the Sword of Misfortune, to bury Su Zimo, the Night Spirit, and the Kunlun race. "Retreat!" Su Zimo growled. "Zimo, young master." Extreme Fire and Nian Qi were greatly alarmed, and wanted to go forward. Night Spirit also struggled to stand up from the Black Dragon's corpse. He wanted to stand beside Su Zimo, and resist the Sword of Misfortune together. "All of you retreat." Su Zimo turned around and shouted with a sharp gaze. Extreme Fire and Nian Qi were slightly stunned. They had never seen such a serious expression on Su Zimo's face. This sword is very terrifying. We can't block it, Su Zimo said in a deep voice. Retreat to the exquisite secret realm immediately, and leave Kunlun ruins. Zimo, what about you? Extreme Fire asked loudly. I can't leave anymore. Su Zimo smiled bitterly. At that moment, if not for the support of Qinglian and his consciousness, the dark and cold energy would have rushed into his consciousness and killed his essence spirit. Night Spirit's eyes were bloodshot. He wanted to charge forward, but he was surrounded by the Kunlun race and retreated to the back of the canyon. Night Spirit was already exhausted, and his aura was weak. He struggled a few times, but could not break free from the Kunlun race's guards. He could only watch as Su Zimo gradually disappeared into the distance in the canyon. A sense of helplessness surged in his heart. Roar! Roar! Night Spirit reared his head and roared into the skies. His voice was mournful and filled with endless sorrow, as though he was weeping. Su Zimo's consciousness was gradually sinking, and his vision was turning blurry. He could vaguely see the dragon cavalry commander approaching with the sword of misfortune in his hand. The footsteps suddenly stopped in front of him. Fufu, the dragon cavalry commander sneered. Aunt, you're very strong to be able to last until now. However, you still have to die. It's your honor to die under the sword of misfortune. The dragon cavalry commander raised the gigantic sword in his hand and aimed it at Su Zimo's chest, stabbing it viciously. Exclamation point. Blood spewed out. The sword of misfortune pierced through Qinglian's true body instantly. The gigantic tip of the sword pierced through Su Zimo's back and blood dripped. Young master. Nianqi's expression was sorrowful as tears gushed out. Extreme Fire's body trembled, as well as he gripped his fists tightly with endless rage in his eyes. The net of misfortune formed by the aura emitted by the sword of misfortune was already so terrifying that it could kill all mighty figures and half-martial ancestors. What realm would the power of the sword of misfortune reach? Even Mahayana patriarchs might not be able to survive against the sword of misfortune, let alone a conjoint body mighty figure like Su Zimo. All of a sudden, Extreme Fire's expression changed as he asked sternly, "What's that?" He was not the only one. Nianqi, Night Spirit, and the other members of the Kunlun race sensed it as well. In the direction of Su Zimo and the dragon cavalry commander, an extremely vast power burst forth. In the face of that power, everyone seemed incomparably insignificant, as though they could be engulfed and disappear at any moment. That was not the power of the sword of misfortune. The aura of that power was completely different from the sword of misfortune. The moment that power appeared, the dark and cold nets of misfortune that filled the valley dissipated silently. The power spiraled in the valley with Su Zimo and the dragon cavalry commander as the center. I've got it, Extreme Fire said in a deep voice. The power of the sword of misfortune has triggered the divine power forbidden zone of the Kunlun ruins and triggered a divine power storm. By the time Extreme Fire said that, the divine power storm in the valley had already formed. The figures of Su Zimo and the dragon cavalry half-martial ancestor were faintly discernible in the divine power storm. Ah! Nianqi exclaimed with a pale face as he muttered instinctively, Divine power storm? Wouldn't young master be torn to pieces by the divine power storm? There were 3 types of divine power storms. There was a minor divine power storm, a major divine power storm, and a supreme divine power storm. However, even a minor divine power storm was enough to tear some Mahayana patriarchs apart, let alone Su Zimo, who was at the conjoint body realm. Ah! Before Nianqi's voice even fell, the Dragon Knight commander's miserable shriek of pain rang out. Within the storm of divine abilities, the Dragon Rider commander's body began to swell at a speed visible to the naked eye, bursting forth with boundless vitality. The vitality was too immense, and the Dragon Cavalry commander's body could not accommodate it at all. It swelled and exploded, turning into a blood mist. His essence spirit was also torn apart by the divine power storm and turned into dust. His body and spirit were destroyed. End of chapter. Chapter 1530. Su Zimo's consciousness was a little blurry, and he was in a daze. He could vaguely sense that something seemed to have happened to the Dragon Knight commander, After a tragic cry, there was no more sound. How could this be? What happened? Is the Dragon Knight Commander dead? Su Zimo's mind was in a mess. The power of the Sword of Misfortune had already broken through the defenses of the Creation Lotus platform. The black-haired essence spirit's body was crawling with the strange power of black spiderwebs. His life force was decreasing rapidly. Qinglian of Creation was also motionless, and her life force was weak. Right then, an extremely boundless life force surged into his body and healed his injuries continuously. Even the dark and cold power of the Sword of Misfortune could not defend against that massive life force. Su Zimo's black-haired essence spirit was initially on the verge of death and could die at any moment. However, after the massive life force was injected into his consciousness, the black-haired essence spirit gradually recovered. The black spiderwebs on the Creation Lotus platform gradually melted as well. Against that boundless life force, the power of the Sword of Misfortune melted silently like snow meeting the blazing sun. Before long, the power of misfortune that invaded Su Zimo's body was completely neutralized by that massive life force. The Sword of Misfortune that was stabbed into his chest was being pulled out bit by bit, as though there was some force pushing it. Before long, with a clang, the divine weapon of the continent of gods was pulled out of Su Zimo's chest and fell to the ground motionlessly. After the massive life force expelled the Sword of Misfortune, it did not show any signs of stopping and surged into Su Zimo's body in a frenzy. Su Zimo's meridians, organs, flesh and blood that were initially devoid of life force gradually recovered under the stimulation of that massive life force. Su Zimo's consciousness also began to return. Before long he woke up. What happened? Su Zimo was slightly stunned and focused his gaze. He found himself in the middle of a huge storm. This storm contained an extremely large amount of life force, as vast as the sea. This life force was endlessly pouring into his body. The wounds on his body were healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Not long after, scabs formed and fell off. There was not a single scar on the wound. It was as smooth as jade. The injuries in his body were also healing rapidly. After all, Qinglian's true body had practically been crippled during this battle, and it was extremely damaged. Only the primeval divine spring would be able to repair it. But now, the effect of this enormous vitality surging into his body seemed to be even more intense than the primordial divine spring. It's the divine ability storm. It didn't take long for Su Zimo to realize what had happened to him. Half-martial ancestor Long Qi took out the misfortune sword. Although the Sword of Misfortune's aura was powerful, it wasn't powerful enough to trigger a divine ability storm. But later on, half-martial ancestor Long Qi used the power of the Sword of Misfortune to stab into his chest, immediately triggering a divine ability storm. The old storyteller had said that the divine ability storm was caused by the remnant power of the divine ability. It was also because of this that the power released by each divine ability storm was different. If it was an offensive divine ability, the divine ability storm that was triggered would definitely contain an extremely terrifying killing power that could easily tear a cultivator apart. As for the divine ability storm in front of him, it was clearly triggered by a healing-type divine ability. It didn't mean that a healing-type divine ability storm didn't have any threat. As long as it was a divine ability, its power would be astonishing and vast like the sea. It was definitely not something that a mighty figure or a half-martial ancestor could withstand. The vitality of a healing-type divine ability was boundless and continuously surged into half-martial ancestor Long Qi's body. Half-martial ancestor Long Qi's body couldn't withstand such an enormous amount of vitality at all. That was why his body exploded and he died. The reason was very simple. Vegetation needed rain, but if a torrent poured down, all the vegetation would die from drowning. Simply put, the Dragon Rider commander was stuffed to death by the immense vitality contained in the divine ability storm. The reason why Su Zimo was still unscathed up till now was because more than half of that massive life force was negated by the power of the Sword of Misfortune. As for Su Zimo's body, it was in tatters and almost lost its vitality. Not only did the vitality not cause any harm to Su Zimo, it even allowed Qinglian's true body to recover, and her injuries were healed. Although the divine ability storm had weakened significantly, there was still a vast amount of vitality that continued to surge into Qinglian's true body. Su Zimo's eyes were filled with ecstasy. If it were anyone else, the remaining vitality would be enough to burst their body and die on the spot. However, this vitality was a rare opportunity for the Green Lotus true body to replenish itself. Su Zimo simply sat cross-legged in the divine ability storm and closed his eyes. He began to absorb and refine the immense vitality in his body and cultivate. Others couldn't eat this vitality. However, Qinglian's true body could swallow it all. As time passed by, Su Zimo's Qinglian's true body became purer, and his essence spirit became more condensed as his cultivation realm increased slowly. Su Zimo had only just cultivated to the late-stage conjoint body realm, after absorbing and refining the fretless wood. If he wanted to advance by another minor realm and reach the peak of the conjoint body realm, he would probably need hundreds or even thousands of years to cultivate normally. His rank, 7 Qinglian's true body was also far away from breaking through to rank 8. But now, by chance, the divine ability storm had descended and allowed Qinglian's true body to transform rapidly. Far away, Extreme Fire, Nian Qi, Night Spirit and the others were finally relieved when they saw that. The three of them exchanged glances and could not help but laugh. There were tears in their laughter. This was the joy of surviving a calamity. The eyes of the Kunlun tribe members widened as they stared at the scene before them in disbelief. There were still people who could survive the divine ability storm? Night Spirit, Extreme Fire and the others did not go far. They guarded the vicinity and rested on the spot to recuperate and heal their injuries. On the one hand, they were worried about Su Zimo's safety. On the other hand, they were also worried that another Protoss would charge out of the Rainbow Cave. Thankfully, after the death of the dragon's commander, God Mainland seemed to have realized something, and no more Protoss entered Tianhuang Mainland. In the blink of an eye, a day and night passed. Night Spirit had already recovered significantly with his powerful regeneration abilities, and was the first to stand up. Even if another Protoss barged in, he would be able to kill them. The rest of the Kunlun race were far inferior. All of them were pale and riddled with wounds, but they were still trying their best to recuperate. Although Extreme Fire and Nian Qi had yet to recover from their injuries, they had recovered a lot of stamina and could move freely. The one who changed the most was Su Zimo. After a day and night, the divine ability storm was almost completely dissipated. As for Su Zimo, his cultivation realm had broken through once more, and he had already reached the peak of the conjoint body realm. His rank, 7 Qinglian's true body was infinitely close to rank 8 as well. Of course, he still needed time to consolidate, and perhaps an opportunity to break through to rank 8. One had to know that since ancient times, the only person who could nurture the creation Green Lotus to grade 8 was the ancient Buddha Emperor. Chapter 1531. Of course, the changes that the divine power storm brought to Su Zimo were not as simple as they seemed on the surface. With the help of the divine power storm, Su Zimo truly sensed the power of divine powers. Of course, it was only a day and night. It was impossible for him to comprehend divine powers. He could not even comprehend a single trace of the power of divine powers. However, this experience of being in close contact with divine powers established a perfect foundation for him to comprehend divine powers in the future. Furthermore, after a day and night of cultivation, along with the transformation of Qinglian's true body, Su Zimo gained a hint of enlightenment. Initially, he thought that he was merely lucky and blessed. Therefore, the divine power storm triggered by the Sword of Misfortune was a healing divine power storm. If it had been a murderous divine ability storm, he would have been torn to shreds by the divine ability storm at the very first moment. His body and Tao would have vanished. However, Su Zimo gradually understood when he sensed the power of the divine power. Qinglian of creation was nurturing a divine power to begin with. However, he did not know if it was a minor, major or supreme divine power. No matter what divine power it was definitely a healing divine power. Therefore, the divine power forbidden zone was triggered by the Sword of Misfortune. However, Due to the existence of Qinglian of creation, it was a healing divine power storm. Every sip and peck was predetermined. There was no fortuitous encounter that would befall him for no reason. Another 6 hours passed. The divine power storm dissipated completely. Su Zimo opened his eyes and stood up. Sensing the immense power and exuberant life force in his body, he could not help but roar. Peak conjoint body realm. The peak of Qinglian's true body at grade 7. If he had not come to Kunlun ruins, Su Zimo would have to cultivate for countless years to reach this realm. Furthermore, Qinglian's true body had undergone the baptism of the divine power storm. The power of the Bloodvine race's kill order on him had long turned into nothingness. Zimo, congratulations. Extreme Fire stepped forward and said with a smile. Su Zimo nodded and said, it was also a blessing in disguise. After this battle, although Extreme Fire's cultivation realm did not break through, his overall combat prowess increased considerably. This was a baptism of life and death. A baptism of blood. Not many people had experienced such a great battle in their cultivation. Not many people were able to survive after such a tragic battle. Everyone who survived would have limitless achievements in the future. This kind of experience was the most precious treasure. Su Zimo looked around and felt that something was missing. He suddenly frowned and asked, where's Nian Qi? I really didn't notice. Extreme Fire exclaimed softly. Over there. A Kunlun race expert with sharp eyes pointed at the 5-colored cave far away and shouted. Su Zimo and the others turned to look. Nian Qi was standing at the entrance of the 5-colored cave and looking over. Her beautiful eyes were fixed on Su Zimo without blinking, revealing a deep reluctance and attachment. Under the illumination of the sunlight, Su Zimo could clearly see 2 drops of sparkling tears rolling down from the corners of Nian Qi's eyes. Su Zimo vaguely realized something and hurriedly took a few steps forward, shouting, Nian Qi, what are you doing? Come back quickly. Nian Qi shook her head without saying anything. However, there was a hint of determination in her eyes. Nian Qi, what's wrong? Extreme Fire said loudly as well. If there's anything, come down and discuss it with us. Why did you run over there? It's so dangerous. Young master, I'm leaving. A moment later, Nian Qi said softly. Frowning, Su Zimo said in a deep voice. Nian Qi, if you still acknowledge me as your young master, come back immediately. Don't do anything stupid. I order you to come back. Su Zimo's tone turned sterner. He had never spoken to Nian Qi in such a tone before. Nian Qi had been by his side for a long time. Although she had always considered herself to be a maidservant, he had never seen Nian Qi as one. Su Zimo treated Nian Qi as his kin, as if she was his biological sister. Nian Qi had never disobeyed his wishes either. No matter what Su Zimo did or said, Nian Qi did not question him at all and supported him without hesitation, without any complaints. Young master, I'm sorry. Nian Qi pursed her lips and held back the tears in her eyes. Taking a deep breath, she said, I can't listen to you this time round. I'm leaving. Su Zimo fell silent. He knew that Nian Qi had already made up her mind, and it was useless no matter how he tried to persuade her. Leave? Where is Nian Qi going? Extreme Fire was still confused and turned to ask Su Zimo. God's mainland. Su Zimo said slowly. Ah. Extreme Fire was startled and jumped in fright. Extreme Fire asked hurriedly, why is she going there? Although she has the bloodline of the Protoss, she knows nothing about God's mainland. Furthermore, if she heads over from Tianhuang mainland, she'll definitely be attacked by God's mainland. Furthermore, only half of the God's blood flows in her body, and her bloodline is impure. God's mainland won't tolerate her. Su Zimo did not reply to Extreme Fire. Others might not be able to understand, but he understood Nian Qi's intentions. Actually, Nian Qi was already acting strangely when she saw the 8 diagrams and learned the truth of the primordial war. Nian Qi was often distracted and lowered her head, not daring to meet Night Spirit's gaze. Although the primordial war had nothing to do with her, she felt guilty and blamed herself because of it. This kind of guilt and self-reproach had reached its limit after yesterday's great battle. Nian Qi was an orphan, an abandoned baby of the Protoss. It was only when she met Su Zimo that she felt like a family. However, Nianqi was still sensitive deep down. Nianqi did not know how she was going to face Night Spirit in the future. Although Night Spirit did not have any enmity towards her, she would definitely recall the blood feud between her parents every time she saw her. Nianqi did not know how she was going to face Su Zimo in the future as well. The truth of the primordial war would be revealed to the public sooner or later. At that time, the fact that Su Zimo's maidservant was a Protoss would definitely attract countless criticisms. She was afraid of causing trouble for Su Zimo and losing Su Zimo. More importantly, Nianqi did not know how to face her. Nianqi was going to the God mainland. Even if her future was uncertain, and it was extremely dangerous, she still had to go. She wanted to face the God mainland alone. She wanted to do something for Su Zimo, for Tianhuang mainland, for the countless living beings who died in the primordial war yesterday, and atone for the Protoss. Perhaps this was also her redemption. Su Zimo and Nianqi looked at each other from afar. There was no need for Nianqi to say or explain. Su Zimo understood Nianqi's intentions. Young master, you have to take good care of yourself when I'm not by your side in the future. Nianqi said gently. All right, Su Zimo nodded. Young master, don't worry. I'll definitely return. Pausing for a moment, Nianqi thought for a moment. If I don't return, don't worry, young master. Perhaps if you don't return, I'll go look for you. Su Zimo interrupted Nianqi and said firmly. When she heard that, Nianqi looked at Su Zimo in a daze and tears gushed out. Chapter 1532. Su Zimo knew that Nianqi had made up his mind. No matter how he tried to persuade or stop him, he could not change Nianqi's decision. Tianhuang mainland was plagued with internal and external troubles, and a great calamity was imminent. All the more, he could not leave and follow Nianqi to the mainland of gods. The only thing he could do was make a promise for Nianqi. Su Zimo's spirit consciousness moved, and a gigantic sword not far away suddenly flew up and landed in his hands. It was one of the 4 divine weapons of the Protoss, the Sword of Misfortune. Su Zimo tossed the Sword of Misfortune to Nianqi. Nianqi caught it instinctively. The gigantic sword was extremely heavy. Even with Nianqi's divine strength, his body sank slightly after gripping the hilt. The Sword of Misfortune did not move at all in Su Zimo's hands. However, when it landed in Nianqi's hands, it emanated a dark and cold aura once more. Young master, Nianqi was confused. Take this sword, and head to the mainland of gods. Su Zimo said in a deep voice. This sword is useless in my hands. Only the bloodline of the Protoss can activate its power. Nianqi pursed her lips, and did not say anything. She knew that this was only on the surface. Even if Su Zimo could not control the power of the Sword of Misfortune, this gigantic sword was still a rare divine weapon. The reason why Su Zimo wanted her to bring the Sword of Misfortune to the mainland of gods was so that she would have a guarantee. The 2 armies of the Protoss that entered Tianhuang mainland and many dragon knights were wiped out without a single survivor. Even the divine weapon was left behind on Tianhuang mainland. Although Nianqi was a remnant of the Protoss and had an impure bloodline, she would definitely make a great contribution if she returned with the Sword of Misfortune. The attitude of the mainland of gods towards her would also change. At the very least, her life would not be in danger. This was Su Zimo's real intention. Thank you, young master. Nianqi held the Sword of Misfortune with both hands and bowed in the direction of Su Zimo from afar. Then, he turned around and leaped into the 5-colored cave, disappearing from sight. Su Zimo stared in that direction, silent for a long time. Alas! Extreme Fire sighed emotionally. Actually, this girl doesn't have to be like this. She's too sensitive. Let her be. Su Zimo said softly. Su Zimo spoke in a carefree manner. But when he thought of Nianqi's uncertain future, and whether they would meet again in the future, a wave of worry and disappointment surged in his heart. Big brother, let's go. Night Spirit said. Su Zimo nodded and instructed. Arrange for some people to keep an eye on the God-slaying canyon. If the Protoss makes any strange movements, we'll know immediately. Actually, the Protoss would most likely be calm for a period of time, after experiencing this crushing defeat. However, he had to be prepared in advance just in case. Although the kill order on Su Zimo had been lifted, he was not in a hurry to return to Tianhuang mainland. Instead, he stayed in the Kunlun ruins temporarily and continued to cultivate. The Kunlun ruins had been stabilized, and Night Spirit had become the new master of Kunlun. There was no place safer and more suitable for cultivation than here. His gains from this battle were too great. The transformation of Qinglian's true body, her perception of divine abilities, and the eye technique in the nether fluorescent stone all required a long time to accumulate. Extreme fire also stayed in the Kunlun ruins. Spring came and autumn passed. Time flew by. Time seemed to pass even faster in seclusion cultivation. In the blink of an eye, Su Zimo had already entered the Kunlun ruins for 100 years. 80 years ago, the Protoss invaded the Kunlun ruins, and a great war broke out. However, in the past 80 years, the internal strife of the Kunlun ruins had been quelled. Many Kunlun beings recuperated and became extremely peaceful. There were no longer any abnormalities in the five-colored cave. However, Tianhuang mainland was in a state of turmoil and chaos. For the past 100 years, the abnormal movements of the primordial races had become more frequent. Among the primordial 9 races, apart from the dragons, Kuan and barbarians, the other 6 races had begun to walk out of their forbidden grounds and expand their territories crazily. For the past 100 years, countless sects and factions were destroyed by the primordial races. Among them, a total of 37 out of the 108 upper sects were destroyed. The number was still slowly increasing. In the chaos of war, countless living beings from the 4 regions, 3 seas, and 1 continent perished. The East Ocean was dyed blood red and did not dissipate for a long time. The young masters of the primordial 6 races led the armies of the Witch, Blood Vine, Protoss, Golden Crow, Rakshasa and Heavenly Eye races to attack the sects and seize territory. Everywhere they passed, a bloodbath was set off. The combat strength of the primordial races was terrifying. Almost all the young masters had already cultivated to the half-martial ancestor realm. Without the patriarchs, no one could suppress the experts of the primordial races. Because the primordial races did not touch the super sects of the cultivation world, the 9 immortal sects, 7 fiend sects, and 6 Buddhist monasteries remained silent for the past 100 years. A delicate balance was maintained between the super sects and the 6 primordial races. However, all the cultivators knew that this state would not last long. Finally, that balance was broken mercilessly after a war broke out in the southern region. The forbidden grounds of the Blood Vine race were in the southern region. As they continued to expand their territory, it was inevitable that a war would break out with Clear Wind Temple of the 9 immortal sects. 100 years ago, Tung Lingzi was killed by Su Zimo. The Blood Vine race had long chosen a new young master. Under the lead of the young master of the Blood Vine race, the army of the Blood Vine race attacked Clear Wind Temple. The battle lasted for an entire day, and countless cultivators of Clear Wind Temple died and were devoured by the Blood Vine race. Finally, the Patriarch of Clear Wind Temple arrived. However, that was also the reason why the Patriarch of the Blood Vine race was alarmed. A single Patriarch of the Blood Vine race killed more than 10 Patriarchs of Clear Wind Temple without a single survivor. The battle escalated. The Emperor of Clear Wind Temple appeared and killed the Patriarch of the Blood Vine race. However, the Blood Emperor of the Blood Vine race descended and killed the Emperor of Clear Wind Temple on the peak of Clear Wind Mountain in just 3 rounds. In the end, the Mystic Emperor was the one who appeared and fought the Blood Emperor, without a victor being decided. He forcefully rescued some cultivators of Clear Wind Temple and retreated to Enigma Palace. However, after that battle, Clear Wind Temple of the 9 immortal sects was destroyed as well. After that battle, the Blood Vine race released even more vicious words. If the emperors of the human race dared to appear again and interfere in the fights of Tianhuang mainland, the Blood Emperor would appear and kill the emperors of the human race in Tianhuang mainland. It was a blatant threat. Furthermore, it was a threat to the emperors of the human race. The cultivation world fell silent. There was no response from the emperors. The emperor of Clear Wind Temple was dead and could not defend against the Blood Emperor for 3 rounds. Many emperors were not confident either. What was even more frightening was that many emperors knew that the Blood Emperor was the weakest among the emperors of the primordial 6 races in this generation. Furthermore, the Bloodvine race had more than one emperor. Before long, the Golden Crow race entered the East region. Clear Heart Nunnery, one of the 6 Buddhist monasteries of the East region, was the first to be destroyed. In this battle, not a single Mahayana patriarch of Clear Heart Nunnery appeared. That was because the Mahayana patriarchs of Clear Heart Nunnery knew that even if they appeared, they would not be able to save Clear Heart Nunnery from destruction. If they appeared, they would only die like the dozens of patriarchs of Clear Wind Temple. The advanced ancient battlefield claimed to be a world where the primordial races could not enter. At the very least, they would be safe as long as they stayed in the advanced ancient battlefield. In just half a day, Clear Heart Nunnery was reduced to ruins. By the time the Patriarch of Enigma Palace arrived, it was already too late. Chapter 1533. Enigma Palace. Old man, what should we do? Lin Xuanji had a worried expression and retracted his cheeky smile. Clear Wind Temple and Clear Heart Nunnery are destroyed, and the calamity of the human race is upon us. If we don't retaliate, the immortal, fiend, and Buddhist sects will be destroyed by the primordial 6 races one by one. At that time, the human race will most likely return to the primordial era and be enslaved by the 10,000 races. The old storyteller stood above a Dao palace and gazed into the distance in silence. I heard that a few wars have broken out in the various demon regions as well. Some of them have already submitted to the primordial 6 races. Lin Xuanji continued. As time passes by, the strength of the primordial 6 races will only increase. At that time, how are we going to defend against them? After a moment of silence, the old storyteller suddenly said, "Spread the news that Enigma Palace is going to convene a convention of the myriad races and invite all the primordial races and major sects over for a discussion." Lin Xuanji shuddered. The old storyteller continued, "We can take a step back. Since the primordial 6 races want the territory, we'll give it to them. We'll try our best to stall for time so that the war doesn't break out right now." Lin Xuanji frowned. Right now the primordial races are at their peak. How can they sit down and negotiate with us normally? At that time, the primordial races will definitely demand an exorbitant price. There's a high chance that this convention of the myriad races will collapse. Even if the negotiations collapse, the situation won't be worse than it is now, the old storyteller said. In the ancient battlefield, I've been calling for the emperors of the human race to defend against the primordial 6 races together. However, there aren't many emperors who responded. Even if all the emperors of the world are gathered, they might not be able to fight against the primordial 6 races, let alone the few of us. The old storyteller laughed self-deprecatingly. I'm not the human emperor after all and don't have his prestige. In the ancient era, none of the emperors of the world dared to disobey the orders of the human emperor. However, the ancestors of the human emperor have ascended to the upper world a long time ago, sigh. Lin Xuanji sighed gently. The old storyteller smiled. Go on and pass down the order. All right. Lin Xuanji nodded heavily and turned to leave. The old storyteller reared his head and gazed into the firmaments, murmuring, Ancestors of the human emperor, please protect the human race and tide over this crisis. The destruction of Clear Heart Nunnery shook the entire cultivation world. Before long, an even more shocking piece of news came from Enigma Palace and spread rapidly throughout Tianhuang mainland, causing an uproar. The Enigma Palace wanted to make the decision and convene the convention of the myriad races. The myriad races had always been there. However, after the Archaic War, the 10,000 races withered and many races were destroyed. The remaining races merged together and were collectively known as the monster race. But this time, the Enigma Palace actually caused such a huge commotion. The Enigma Palace was considered a sacred ground of the human race and was the most mysterious. Even among the primordial races, Enigma Palace had an extremely high status. After all, it was created by Fairy Linglong back then. Furthermore, Fairy Linglong was the wife of the human emperor. Upon hearing this news, the various sects and forces naturally wouldn't reject it. The destruction of the Clear Wind Temple and the Clear Heart Nunnery made all the cultivators of the super sects feel threatened. Now that Enigma Palace was taking the lead, they might be able to resolve this conflict if they could sit down and have a good chat with the primordial 6 races. The various super sects were the first to respond. The forbidden grounds of the Protoss. 6 figures with terrifying auras sat in the palace and exuded the might of emperors. The void around the 6 of them trembled and distorted. To think that the Enigma Palace of the human race would make such a move. Interesting. The person who spoke had a vertical eye on his glabella. He was the emperor of this generation of the Heavenly Eye race, the Heavenly Eye Emperor. The Blood Emperor sneered. The ants of the human race are already afraid. That's why they want to convene a convention of the myriad races. Why should we bother? There's no harm in letting the juniors of the race take a look. Shenhuang smiled gently. If the patriarch of the human race doesn't appear, nobody can threaten them. We can leave this matter to them. Furthermore, a few super sects of the human race have already taken the initiative to approach us and choose to submit. Fufu. Another emperor who was burning with golden flames nodded gently. We have to deal with the humans as soon as possible. Thereafter, we have to join forces to deal with the dragons. We can't let that dragon phoenix grow. Don't worry, it's only been a few years. That dragon phoenix is still far from that. After Enigma Palace spread the news, the primordial 6 races agreed to it after 10 days. At that time, they would arrive at Enigma Palace. Following this, the other 8 beast realms agreed to it too. The world was in an uproar. Almost all the sects, factions and races of Tianhuang mainland were gathered for this convention of the myriad races. It was definitely an unprecedented event. Pingyang Town. Wu Dao's true body, who was in seclusion in his room, sensed something and opened his eyes in the darkness. In a flash, he floated down from the bed and pushed the door open. Before long, a graceful figure appeared in the sky above Pingyang Town. The woman was extremely beautiful and slender. Standing in midair, she looked down at Wu Dao's true body with a conflicted expression. She was Yu Luosha, who had rushed over from Misty Peak. What is it? Wu Dao's true body asked indifferently. Yu Luosha recounted the news of the convention of the myriad races. Oh, Wu Dao's true body replied casually. Clenching her fists slightly, Yu Luosha said, Araki Takashi, the human race has already started to compromise. After the convention of the myriad races, the situation in Tianhuang mainland will definitely change, and the human race will be reduced to the bottom of the 10,000 races once more. No matter how monstrous you are, and how invincible you are among your peers, you can't defend against patriarchs or emperors. You can't save the human race alone. Wu Dao's true body was unmoved and asked with an unchanged expression. So I can give you a chance, Yu Luosha said. I don't need you to submit to me. As long as you're willing to join the Rakshasa race, I can make the decision to ensure that the Rakshasa race will not harm your life or anyone related to you. Wu Dao's true body laughed mockingly. Go back. There's no need to guard Misty Peak anymore. However, you have to remember not to leak any information about me. Now that the convention of the myriad races was about to begin, no one would be keeping an eye on Misty Peak. It was completely useless for Yu Luosha to guard Misty Peak. With that said, Wu Dao's true body turned and returned to his room. Yu Luosha gripped her fists with a furious expression. Over the years, it was not that she had not tried to challenge Wu Dao's true body. However, each time she broke through and her combat strength increased, she would be suppressed miserably whenever she challenged him again. 20 years ago, she had already broken through to become a half-martial ancestor. She came to challenge Wu Dao's true body confidently, but was still suppressed mercilessly. Yu Luosha had mixed feelings towards Wu Dao's true body. In the depths of her heart, she could not even hate Wu Dao's true body. When she learned that the primordial 6 races had started attacking the various major sects and factions, Her first reaction was to make use of her identity to protect Wu Dao's true body. My good intentions are taken for granted. Yu Luosha cursed angrily. Let's see how you're going to come begging me after the convention of the myriad races. Chapter 1534. Convention of the Myriad Races. After returning to his room, Wu Dao's true body murmured softly. Young master, will the human race be able to tide through this crisis? Momo also realized that the human race was in an extremely difficult situation. I don't know. Wu Dao's true body shook his head gently. However, it's time to head to North Sea to take a look. If the major sects and factions of the human race were the only ones in this convention, they would not be able to go against the primordial 6 races. Be it in terms of strength or aura, they were far inferior. This time round, the other 3 races had to express their stance as well. It was easy for the dragons. After all, they had the Dragon Phoenix true body. At that moment, the Dragon Phoenix true body had already received the news in the ancestral Dragonland. The only thing he had to do was to obtain the support of the Kuan race and Barbarian race. Wu Dao's true body knew nothing about the Barbarian race. However, he had once made a move against the Kuan race more than 100 years ago. It was hard to tell whether this move was a blessing or a curse. That was not an ordinary bloodline or demon beast, but a taboo Kuan Peng. The 3 great taboos. Each one of them was decisive in killing. If the Kuan Peng grew and did not acknowledge him as its master, he would not receive any support in his trip to North Sea. He might even encounter danger. However, Wu Dao's true body did not hesitate and set off for North Sea immediately. At the same time, he informed Qinglian's true body, who was still cultivating in the Kunlun ruins, and told her about the news of Tianhuang mainland and the convention of the myriad races. 7 days later, a figure appeared above the glacier of the extreme north. Even in this world of ice and snow, it could not affect the footsteps of that figure. It was as though a gigantic furnace was burning within the body of Wu Dao's true body, and his blood qi was exuberant. Before long, a dark ocean finally appeared in front of Wu Dao's true body. In the extreme north, this was the only ocean that did not show any signs of freezing. This was the forbidden ground of the Kuan race, North Sea. Wu Dao's true body stood at the edge of North Sea and looked down at the deep ocean below. He released a spirit consciousness fluctuation and shouted, "Carefree!" That voice was enough to spread throughout North Sea. He believed that Carefree could definitely hear him. Wu Dao's original body was standing at the edge of the Northern Sea, quietly waiting. Even he didn't know whether what awaited him would be a welcome or a massacre. Before long, Wu Dao narrowed his eyes. He could clearly sense that there was an extremely terrifying aura rushing towards the surface of the sea from the depths of the sea. Soon, a figure quietly broke through the water surface and slowly rose from the sea. This was a woman with long silver hair. She had a cold expression and a heroic spirit. She stared at Wu Dao's original body with an unfriendly expression. Although the woman looked young, her aura was extremely terrifying and had already surpassed the conjoint body realm. Mahayana realm, the ancestor of the Kuan race. Wu Dao's expression remained unchanged. He narrowed his eyes slightly and prepared to leave. With his current combat strength, he still had no chance of winning against a Mahayana realm patriarch. Voila! At this moment, the sound of water came from the surface of the sea. A strong figure broke out of the water and somersaulted in the air. He came to Su Zimo's side and knelt down directly. "Greetings, master." It was a young man who looked to be 15 or 16 years old. He was rather handsome and had huge, watery eyes that were unusually lively. Carefree? Wu Dao's original body was slightly stunned. After all, Carefree was merely a gigantic egg when he brought him to the Northern Sea. Even Wu Dao's original body did not know what Carefree looked like. After not seeing him for 100 years, Carefree's cultivation had improved by leaps and bounds. He was already at the Dharma characteristic realm. "It's me." Carefree smiled and turned to look at the silver-haired woman in midair. "Sister, this is my master. Don't give him a long face." Humph. The silver-haired woman's expression was still unpleasant when she heard Carefree's words. She harumphed coldly and said, If you hadn't brought Carefree back just now, you would have been a dead man. Wu Dao's original body smiled and did not argue. Right now, he had no chance of winning against a Mahayana realm patriarch. However, it was impossible for a Mahayana realm patriarch to kill him. Master, don't mind her. Carefree pouted his lips and said excitedly, Master, it's been a long time since you came to look for me. I'm bored out of my wits here. When are you going to bring me out to play? There's a grand event outside in a few days. It's extremely lively. You can go and take a look. Wu Dao's original body smiled gently. Really? Carefree's eyes lit up. What do you want? The silver-haired woman asked coldly with an unfriendly tone. Wu Dao's original body did not hide anything and said in a deep voice, I want the Kuan race to participate in the convention of the 10,000 races and stand on the side of the human race. Fufu. The silver-haired woman scoffed. Why should I? You're a conjoint body mighty figure? Wu Dao's original body shook his head. If the Kuan race stands by idly for the safety of the human race, the primordial 6 races will definitely turn around and deal with you guys after suppressing the human race. The primordial 6 races will definitely not allow the taboo to grow. You know the stakes involved, and there's no need for me to elaborate. The silver-haired woman fell silent. Sister, I want to go, Carefree said hurriedly. The silver-haired woman glared at Carefree and turned to ask, From what I know, dragons have a taboo as well. That's right. Wu Dao's original body nodded. The taboo of dragons is my clone. The dragons will participate in this convention of the 10,000 races as well. My dragon phoenix true body will personally head to Enigma Palace. The silver-haired woman's heart skipped a beat when she heard that. There was a signal in his words. The dragons would definitely stand on the side of the human race. I'll go back and discuss it. You can leave. The silver-haired woman remained silent for a long time before saying. She turned to Carefree and said, Let's go back. Master. Carefree looked at Wu Dao's original body with an aggrieved expression. Go on. Wu Dao's original body nodded and turned to leave without lingering. East Region Boulder Forest. This was one of the 9 forbidden grounds of Tianhuang mainland, and no living being dared to step foot in this place. However, on this day, a group of cultivators arrived outside Boulder Forest. The leader had shoulder-length scarlet hair and wore scarlet armor. He had delicate features and exuded an extremely berserk aura. The Dragon Phoenix True Body had arrived. Behind the Dragon Phoenix True Body was a group of dragons. All of them were the strongest paragons and monster incarnates of the younger generation. Long Song of the 5-clawed Divine Dragon, and Long Shi of the Dragon Phoenix. That included Solitary Cloud, who had already joined the Illumination Dragon lineage. The reason why the Dragon Phoenix True Body descended personally to Boulder Forest of the East region was to invite the barbarian race out. I am Long Mo, and I'm here to pay my respects to fellow Taoists of the barbarian race. Please meet me. The voice of the Dragon Phoenix True Body was neither loud nor soft. However, it spread to every corner of Boulder Forest. Before long, a deafening sound echoed from Boulder Forest. Countless boulders swayed, and a passageway opened up. A group of extremely tall and strong figures exuded an oppressive aura from the depths of the boulders. Chapter 1535. The barbarian race was extremely tall. Every single barbarian was more than 30 feet tall, and had beast skins wrapped around their waists, bearing their upper bodies. Their bodies were covered in fur, and their limbs were thick. Their skin was coarse and thick, resembling uncivilized barbarians. The dragon race was already taller than ordinary humans, but in front of the barbarian race, they only reached the barbarian race's knees. Compared to the barbarian race, the Dragon Phoenix True Body looked short. However, in terms of aura, it was completely above the barbarian race. The barbarian race could sense a bloodline suppression from the Dragon Phoenix True Body. You're the young master of the dragons, Long Mo? The leader of the barbarian race was at the conjoint body realm. He arrived before the many dragons and lowered his head slightly, staring at the Dragon Phoenix True Body at the front, and asking in a muffled voice. Yes, the Dragon Phoenix True Body nodded. I'm Manfeng, the personal guard of the young master. Fellow Taoists, dragons, please follow me. After saying that, Man Feng turned around and led the way towards the rock forest. The barbarian race was massive, and the ground trembled slightly as they walked through the rock forest. The dragon phoenix true body had an indifferent expression as it followed Man Feng towards the habitat of the barbarian race. However, Long Tsong, Long Shi and the other dragons did not look too good. Your young master sure is arrogant. Long Tsong smiled gently and said mockingly. Our young master of the dragons is here, and you only sent a personal guard to welcome him? In the hearts of Long Tsong and the others, the young master of the primordial race had to be received personally by the other party's young master in order to not be slighted. Furthermore, the dragon phoenix true body was a taboo. It would be normal even for an ancestor realm expert of the barbarian race to receive him personally. To think that the barbarian race would only send some conjoint body realm barbarians and a personal guard of their young master. Master, the attitude of the barbarian race doesn't seem too good. Solitary Cloud sent a voice transmission to the dragon phoenix true body. Let's wait and see. The dragon phoenix true body's expression did not change. When Man Feng heard Long Tsong's mockery, he was not enraged and laughed foolishly. I'm truly sorry. It just so happens that some guests came today. Our young master is receiving them and can't leave. Oh! The heart of the dragon phoenix true body stirred as he fell into deep thought. Anyone who could enter the forbidden grounds of the berserker race and be received personally by their young master had to be from the primordial 9 races. However, he did not know which primordial race had come. I wonder which ferocious race has come. Long Tsong also speculated this point and asked aloud. Fellow dragons, you'll know soon enough. Man Feng said. The young master is in the savage palace. He will receive everyone together. Long Tsong and the others looked at each other. There was no need to think too much. The intention of this primordial race was definitely to rope in the berserkers as well. Over the years, the barbarian race had always maintained a neutral stance regarding the conquest of infinite wasteland, the conflict with the human race, and the killing of taboos. This made both sides want to rope in the barbarian tribe. If the dragons could think of this, the primordial 6 races would definitely be able to as well. The dragons did not have much confidence in winning over the barbarians. Now that other primordial races had arrived, this trip was even more difficult for the dragons. Man Feng led Su Zimo and the others forward. After passing through boulders one after another, the boulders swayed and intertwined once more. The dragon phoenix true body turned back to take a look. The landing points of the boulders were rather particular and formed a unique and mysterious formation. If they did not have the lead of the barbarian race, there was a high chance that they would fall into it if they barged in. Before long, a massive and ancient palace appeared in front of everyone. The palace was made up of gigantic rocks and was a few thousand feet tall. There were no doors or windows, and the architectural style was simple and barbaric, exuding an aura of the primordial era. Every single boulder was filled with potholes and traces of countless divine weapons, and the baptism of war were left behind. On a boulder in the middle of the palace, 3 words were written, Savage Palace. Before they arrived at Savage Palace, they could hear hearty laughter coming from within, as though both sides were chatting happily. The hearts of Long Tsong and the others sank. The other party was the first to arrive. The situation was bad. Long Tsong and the others looked at the dragon phoenix true body instinctively with questioning looks. The dragon phoenix true body was expressionless as he continued to follow behind Man Feng towards Savage Palace. When they arrived at the entrance of the palace, they could see that there were many people seated in the palace, toasting and exchanging cups in a lively manner. A tall barbarian sat on the high seat in the middle. By the looks of it, that was the young master of the barbarian race, Man Hu. On his right, there was a handsome man seated on the ground with a smile on his face, toasting the young master of the barbarian race. The man had blonde hair and green eyes. Dressed in pale golden robes, he had a strong blood chi, and every single move he made exuded a noble aura. Protoss. The cultivation of the Protoss was at the half-martial ancestor realm. Of course, the cultivation of the dragon phoenix true body had also improved by leaps and bounds after cultivating in the ancestral dragon land for the past few years, reaching the half-martial ancestor realm. So strong! The moment Long she caught sight of the Protoss, her heart skipped a beat. The Protoss gave her an extremely dangerous feeling. Even Long Song had a grim expression as he frowned and sent a voice transmission to Su Zimo secretly. That's one of the most famous monster incarnates of the Protoss right now. The young master of the Protoss, the Emperor Heaven God Child. There were two monster incarnates in this generation of the Protoss. The Emperor Heaven God Child and the Shaoxiang Goddess. For the past 100 years, the two monster incarnates merely attacked 3 times and destroyed the 3 upper sects of the cultivation world, causing their names to shake Tianhuang mainland. It was rumored in the cultivation world that the Emperor Heaven God Child and the Shaoxiang Goddess were the 2 strongest monster incarnates of the Protoss in the past tens of thousands of years. The 2 of them even became Dao companions and were truly a match made in heaven. Behind the Emperor Heaven God Child stood 2 conjoint body Protoss with their hands behind their backs. By the looks of it, they should be the guards and servants of the Emperor Heaven God Child. Just as the Dragon Phoenix true body stepped into the Savage Palace, the Emperor Heaven God Child put down his wine glass and turned around slightly with a fake smile. The Emperor Heaven God Child sized up the Dragon Phoenix true body with a murderous glint in his eyes. However, the Dragon Phoenix true body's gaze had already shifted to the 3 people behind the 2 servants. Among the 3 Protoss, there was an old man, an old woman and a middle-aged man. Although the cultivation realms of the 3 of them were not obvious, they emanated extremely terrifying auras. The Dragon Phoenix true body narrowed his eyes slightly. Everyone be careful. They might be ancestor gods. Long Song suddenly sent a voice transmission with a hint of seriousness. A Protoss of the ancestor realm. They were not half-martial ancestors. They were true patriarchs. Sensing the gaze of the Dragon Phoenix true body, the 3 ancestor gods raised their heads at the same time and looked over. Both parties' gazes met in midair and sparks seemed to fly. The atmosphere in the Savage Palace turned solemn instantly. Just now, the hall was still bustling with noise and excitement. In the blink of an eye, it was dead silent, and one could hear a pin drop. Chapter 1536. Ha 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 ha. Right at this moment, a wave of loud and clear laughter sounded out from within the hall. It was filled with energy, and it shook the entire hall to the point of trembling slightly. The young master of the barbarian race stood up and cupped his fists at the Dragon Phoenix true body. Welcome, Brother Long Mo. Please forgive me for not welcoming you. Please take a seat, Brother Long Mo. The young master of the barbarian race looked warm and sincere, as though he was not scheming at all. Coupled with such a strong body, it was easy to give off the impression that he was strong and simple-minded. However, the Dragon Phoenix true body knew very well. None of those who could become the young master of a race were fools. It was clear that the young master of the barbarian race wanted him to meet the Protoss and gather in the Savage Palace on purpose. His ultimate goal was most likely to be to fight for the greatest benefits for the barbarian race. What should we do? Judging from the Protoss stance, it's imperative that we rope in the barbarian race. Furthermore, the Protoss even sent 3 ancestral gods. Long she was a little worried and asked with her spirit consciousness, "Young master, you have a noble status. Why don't we return to the Dragon Bone Valley immediately?" No. Long Song shook his head gently and sent a voice transmission. This is the territory of the barbarian race, and they are the masters. The Protoss will definitely not dare to hurt anyone. Furthermore, there are 2 patriarchs of the barbarian race guarding behind Man Hu. If those 3 ancestral gods really dare to attack, the patriarchs of the barbarian race will definitely interfere as well. Solitary Cloud nodded as well. Agreed. From the looks of it, the barbarian race is the safest place. If we leave rashly, the Protoss will leave with us and will be in danger instead. The 3 of them discussed as they sent voice transmissions. Naturally, they did not hide their spirit consciousness voice transmissions from the Dragon Phoenix true body. However, The dragon phoenix true body remained silent and expressionless. The three of them did not know what he was thinking. Under everyone's gazes and the intense hostility of the Protoss, the dragon phoenix true body was calm and composed. He was the first to step into the Savage Palace and stood in the middle of the hall. "Your long mo?" The Emperor Heaven Shensi stood up slowly. His eyes lit up as he said faintly, "I've heard a lot about you." The true body of the dragon phoenix did not even look at the Emperor Heaven God. She stood in the middle of the hall and looked at the young master of the barbarian tribe before her. She went straight to the point. "Let's cut to the chase. I'm here to obtain the support of the barbarian tribe. In the convention of the 10,000 races, I hope that the barbarian race can stand together with the dragons and humans against the primordial 6 races." "Poochie." A sneer came from the side. The Emperor Heaven Shensi had a mocking look on his face as he looked at the dragon phoenix true body with disdain. Initially, he thought that Long Mo was a powerful figure as one of the 3 great taboos. To think that he would be so impatient. Hee. The 2 Protoss Almighties behind the Emperor Heaven God-child laughed at the same time. The Emperor Heaven Shensi said leisurely, "I've long heard that the so-called Forbidden Dragon Phoenix is merely a clone of the human race's Araki Takashi. Initially, I didn't quite believe it. Now that I've seen it today, I know that the rumors are true." The Emperor Heaven Shensi looked at Long Song and the others. "Aren't you guys afraid that he will bring the dragons into the endless abyss by conferring such a human clone as the young master? How can an outsider like you interfere with the position of the young master of the dragons?" Long Song harumphed coldly with an unfriendly tone. "How dare you?" the Protoss Almighties hollered. "How can a follower interrupt when the young master is speaking?" Long Song's expression darkened, and his gaze turned cold. Although he was not the young master of the dragons, he was still a 5-clawed divine dragon with a noble bloodline. If not for the birth of the taboo, he would have been the young master of the dragons. Although the Emperor Heaven Shensi was a half-martial ancestor, and he was only at the conjoint body realm, he was someone who dared to challenge the Emperor Heaven Shensi. Apart from the dragon phoenix true body, he had never been berated as such. Haha. Right then, the young master of the barbarian race laughed and dispelled the tense atmosphere in the hall. "I like Brother Long Mo's personality. He's straightforward and doesn't beat around the bush." However, the young master of the barbarian race changed the topic. "There's no hurry. Brother Long Mo, please take a seat. Let's discuss while drinking." The dragon phoenix true body was still motionless as he asked, "In that case, the barbarian race hasn't made up your mind yet?" The young master of the barbarian race smiled. "This matter is of great importance. This decision concerns the fate of the barbarian race and its future. We have to be cautious." The guard of the young master of the barbarian race, Man Feng, suddenly asked, "Did the dragons bring any gifts this time round?" "Gifts?" Many dragons were stunned. Long Song, Long Shi, and the others looked at each other awkwardly. The reason why they came this time round was purely to state the stakes with the barbarian race and rope them in with the reputation of the taboo. They truly had not thought of bringing any gifts. "Fufu." The Emperor Heaven Shensi smiled leisurely. "Why, fellow dragons, don't tell me you came empty-handed?" Long Song and the rest had ugly looks on their faces as they remained silent. The dragon phoenix true body was still expressionless. The young master of the barbarian race had been paying attention to the dragon phoenix true body's expression the entire time. However, after observing for a while, he could not tell what the latter was thinking. Unfathomable. That was the young master of the barbarian race's evaluation of the dragon phoenix true body. The young master of the barbarian race chuckled and tried to smooth things over. "It's fine. All of you are guests, and there's no need for gifts. We're all from the primordial races, so there's no need to stand on ceremony." "That might be the case, but aren't you underestimating the berserkers too much if you come empty-handed if you want to ask them to come?" The Emperor Heaven Shensi did not give up on the opportunity to deal a blow to the dragons and said, "I'm here with a valuable gift. That's the only way to express the sincerity of the Protoss." With that said, the Emperor Heaven Shensi took out a storage bag. With a single thought of his spirit consciousness, the items scattered all over the storage bag shone with divine lights. Among these items, there were divine weapons, spirit pills, and heaven and earth treasures. There were even some cultivation techniques and secret skills. Is this the essence yang sand? The young master of the barbarian race stared at a handful of sand on the ground with a glint in his eyes and asked seriously. That's right, the Emperor Heaven Shensi said proudly. I've long known that the essence yang sand is extremely beneficial for the physique of the barbarian race. I obtained these by luck in a primordial ruin and brought them over for brother man who. Ha 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 ha. The young master of the barbarian race burst into laughter and could not conceal the excitement on his face. Brother Emperor Heaven, you're too kind. Young master, what should we do? Long Tsang frowned slightly and asked with a voice transmission. We're unprepared and were defeated by the Emperor Heaven Shensi. By the looks of it, the barbarian race is probably going to join forces with the Protoss. Suddenly, the Dragon Phoenix True Body said, Actually, I've prepared a huge gift for the barbarian race as well. Oh, what sort of gift? Man who revealed an interested expression. That was what he wanted to see the most. The barbarian race could only benefit the most from the competition between the two primordial races. This gift is very precious. I believe that the barbarian race will definitely like it. The Dragon Phoenix True Body also smiled and said meaningfully. The young master of the barbarian race was even more curious and could not help but stand up. Brother Long Mo, I'm looking forward to it now that you've said that. Long Tsang and the others were confused. Even they did not know what gift the Dragon Phoenix True Body had prepared. The Emperor Heaven Shensi had a look of disdain and scoffed. Stop pretending to be mysterious. What gift did you bring? Take it out, and let everyone take a look. Sure. The Dragon Phoenix True Body turned around and looked at the Emperor Heaven Godchild. She said slowly, The gift I've prepared is your head. I'm in a bad mood today. I'll add more in 2 days. End of chapter. Chapter 1537. The moment he said that, the Dragon Phoenix True Body had already attacked. Nobody expected that someone would dare to attack right under the noses of the two patriarchs of the barbarian race and the 3 ancestor gods. This was the Savage Palace, the territory of the barbarian race. Even if the Protoss had a strong killing intent towards the Dragon Phoenix True Body, he would not dare to attack here. Even Long Tsang and the other dragons widened their eyes and froze on the spot, unable to react for a moment, let alone the Protoss and the barbarians. Young master is way too bold. That was the only thought left in the minds of many dragons. Just now, the dragons were still secretly discussing how to avoid being killed by the Protoss. Unexpectedly, the Dragon Phoenix True Body wanted to kill the Imperial Heaven Divine Child on the spot in front of everyone in the Savage Palace. The dragons did not expect that the gift mentioned by the Dragon Phoenix True Body was actually the Imperial Heaven Divine Child's life. The Imperial Heaven Divine Child was slightly stunned. Before the sneer on his lips faded completely, the Dragon Phoenix True Body's killing move had already descended. It was too sudden. Without any warning. By the time the Imperial Heaven Divine Child realized what was happening, a snow-white saber with a sharp edge had already descended from the skies. In the body of this saber, one could clearly see dragon bones. That was the dermic weapon left behind by the Saber Emperor, the Dragon Soul Saber. Incomparably violent saber chi circled and condensed into a lifelike divine dragon that opened its bloody mouth and let out a dragon roar. Almost at the same time, the Dragon Phoenix True Body also opened its mouth and let out a loud dragon roar. The two dragon roars merged perfectly, resulting in a resonance. Their destructive power had reached its limit. Roar! The dragon roar reverberated in the Savage Palace and was deafening. The dragon roar sounded right beside the Imperial Heaven Divine Child's ears. It was too close. The Emperor Heaven God Child felt a piercing pain in his ears. There was a loud boom in his mind, and it felt like it was about to explode. 2 streams of blood shot out of the Imperial Heaven God Child's ears. The 2 Protoss mighty figures behind the Imperial Heaven Divine Child were slightly further away. However, They were even more devastated by the dragon roar. Poof! Puff! The two Protoss seemed to have suffered a heavy blow. They opened their mouths and spat out large mouthfuls of blood. Blood mist burst out of their bodies, and clear bloodstains appeared on their handsome faces. And this was the Protoss. If it were any other living being, just this dragon roar alone might have killed them on the spot. For example, although the witch race was one of the primordial 9 races, their bloodlines and bodies were weak. Their bodies could be shattered by such a terrifying dragon roar. But the Protoss was different. The Protoss's body and bloodline were ranked at the top of the primordial 9 races and could compete with dragons. Moreover, the Imperial God-Child was the most powerful demon that the Protoss had seen in tens of thousands of years. Crash! There was no need for him to do it himself. His physical body naturally reacted to this kind of stimulation, and his divine blood began to circulate on its own. In the blink of an eye, it had already risen to the level of tidal blood. The piercing pain in his ears and the rumbling in his head disappeared in an instant. The Emperor Heaven God-Child's eyes regained their clarity. Even so, he had already lost the initiative. Longimo, how dare you? You must have a death wish. The 3 ancestral gods were enraged and roared. They attacked right away and charged towards the dragon phoenix true body. How dare you? Insolent! The 2 patriarchs of the barbarian race shouted as well and stomped their feet on the ground. With a bang, their gigantic bodies soared into the air and charged towards the dragon phoenix true body. The barbarian race had to stop them. The dragon phoenix true body was disrespectful to the barbarian race by attacking in their territory. That was secondary. If the Imperial God-Child died in Savage Palace, the barbarian race would not be able to escape responsibility, even if he was killed by the dragon phoenix true body, and would definitely fall out with the Protoss. This was definitely not the barbarian race's wish. The barbarian race had massive bodies, and the 2 patriarchs of the barbarian race had already crossed half the palace in a few steps, arriving above the dragon phoenix true body. The hearts of Long Song and the others jumped to their throats instantly. If the patriarchs of the primordial 5 races attacked, the dragon phoenix true body would not be able to survive as a half-martial ancestor, let alone continue killing the Imperial God-Child. The difference between a half-martial ancestor and a patriarch was a major cultivation realm. At the Dharma characteristic realm, the primordial races or some demons would awaken their innate divine powers. Although those innate divine powers were known as divine powers, they were extremely different from the divine powers of the cultivation world. They were more like innate powers. However, there were many innate powers that could continue to grow as one's cultivation base increased, and one's cultivation base increased. When the primordial races advanced to the Mahayana realm, those innate divine powers would grow into true divine powers that could fight against the minor, major, and even peerless divine powers of the cultivation world. In other words, the dragon phoenix true body, that was still at the half-martial ancestor realm, could not fight against a patriarch in terms of strength. The Imperial God-Child looked at the dragon phoenix true body, that was inches away with a mocking look in his eyes. Although the dragon phoenix true body attacked suddenly, he knew that he would not die with the protection of the ancestral god. The dragon phoenix true body's actions were akin to digging his own grave. All of a sudden, the left hand of the dragon phoenix true body conjured a strange dermic art. Spreading his fingers, a gray mist was released from his palm. Baron! The voice of the dragon phoenix true body sounded without any fluctuations. With the dragon phoenix true body as the center, an extremely strange dermic power fluctuation burst forth. Grayish ripples appeared in the air like water ripples. They spread out in all directions and enveloped the Emperor Heaven Shensi immediately. The Imperial God-Child's expression changed. He could clearly feel that his lifespan was depleting at a terrifying speed. Even his god blood couldn't stop it. The gray ripples rippled and enveloped the 2 patriarchs of the barbarian race and 3 ancestral gods in the blink of an eye. Pust! The expressions of the 2 patriarchs changed starkly as they gasped. The senses of the Mahayana patriarchs were even sharper. They could clearly sense that the closer they were to the Dragon Phoenix true body, the faster their lifespan was decreasing. The 5 Mahayana patriarchs released their divine powers at the same time, wanting to defend against the strange gray ripples. However, the 5 Mahayana patriarchs soon discovered that their divine powers could not stop their lifespan from decreasing as well. That dharmic art ignored one's cultivation realm. Even their divine powers could not dispel it. The lifespan of Mahayana patriarchs was long. The lifespan of human patriarchs was as long as 100,000 years. The lifespan of patriarchs and ancestral gods of the barbarian race was even longer. However, no one would complain about having too much lifespan. The 2 patriarchs hesitated for a moment and retreated, breaking free from the gray ripples for the time being. After all, the imperial godchild was not the young master of the barbarian race. The 2 patriarchs of the barbarian race did not want to sacrifice thousands of years of their lifespan just to save a foreign race. That would not be worth it. Although the 2 patriarchs of the barbarian race retreated temporarily, the 3 ancestral gods could not retreat. Among the 3 ancestral gods, there was an old man, an old woman, and a middle-aged man. Needless to say, the middle-aged ancestral god was at his peak with a long lifespan and was fearless. Although the old woman was in her twilight years, she still had more than 10,000 years of lifespan left. She could still withstand the exhaustion of 1,000 years of lifespan. However, the old ancestral god only had slightly more than 1,000 years of lifespan left. Before he could reach the Dragon Phoenix true body, the life aura of the old man's body was depleted rapidly, and he did not even have a chance to escape. Right in front of everyone, the ancestral god withered. End of chapter. Chapter 1538. A Mahayana Patriarch. Furthermore, he was a patriarch of the Protoss. Even though he only had slightly more than 1,000 years of lifespan left, the combat strength he could unleash was something that even some human patriarchs had to avoid. However, under the shroud of Baron, the ancestor god withered like a fallen leaf. His face was filled with wrinkles, and his gaze dimmed as he collapsed in the wilderness palace. A hint of fear flashed through the eyes of the 2 ancestral barbarians. The imperial heaven godchild's expression changed. He was barren, and could still afford to expend his lifespan for a short period of time. However, the true danger came from the dragon soul saber that descended from the skies. From the moment the dragon roar burst forth to the release of Baron, the Dragon Phoenix true body did not retract the dragon soul saber, and was still slashing down towards the imperial heaven godchild's head. After the Dragon Phoenix true body released Baron, the 2 ancestral barbarians retreated, and an ancestor god died. Under the shroud of Baron, the speed of the remaining 2 ancestor gods decreased as well. This meant that the imperial heaven godchild had to save himself first. The 2 ancestor gods could only rush over if he blocked Su Zimo's slash, and delayed it for a moment. The imperial heaven godchild's heart skipped a beat when he saw the coldness in the eyes of the Dragon Phoenix true body. The killing intent of the Dragon Phoenix true body was way too intense. Humph! The imperial heaven godchild channeled his essence spirit, and his blood chi surged. He circulated his bloodline wildly, wanting to release his bloodline phenomenon to defend against the dragon soul saber. All of a sudden, the imperial heaven godchild's expression changed starkly. The Dragon Phoenix true body's dragon soul saber slashed down and released a saber intent. Under that saber intent, the god blood in his body froze. How could this be? The imperial heaven godchild was shocked. The god blood of the Protoss could be cultivated to the realm of the bloodline phenomenon innately. But now, under the shroud of that saber intent, even the tsunami blood had disappeared, let alone the bloodline phenomenon. His god blood gradually calmed down and remained still in his body. Even the dragons did not recognize that slash. The Dragon Phoenix true body attacked, and was determined to kill the imperial heaven godchild here. He did not hold back at all, and released the strongest move of the Saber Emperor's inheritance, ocean calming down. Once the sea calming technique was used, even if the imperial godchild possessed an extremely powerful divine blood, he would still have to calm down. The Imperial Heaven Shensi had lost the initiative repeatedly, and it was already too late for him to condense another spell. His eyes shone brightly and instantly turned golden, shining with boundless radiance. Eye technique. Instantaneous casting of eye techniques was the only way he could turn defeat into victory and avert danger into safety. But at the same time, he saw an even more dazzling red light burst out from the eyes of the Dragon Phoenix true body. Illuminating eye. This was an even more terrifying visual technique than the Illumination Dragon Eye. The two eye techniques collided in midair. Almost as soon as the golden light touched the red light, the golden light began to dissipate. The red light shot straight into the eyes of the Emperor Heaven God Child. The Emperor Heaven God Child let out a blood-curdling shriek as his eyes were blinded by the two beams of red light. He was in so much pain that he almost fainted. However, as the most powerful monster among the Protoss, he was still able to maintain his clarity of mind. He knew that the true danger had just arrived. It was the Dragon Soul Saber above his head. The Emperor Heaven God Child did not even have the time to summon his Destiny Dermic weapon. He could only raise his arms instinctively to block the Dragon Soul Saber. Poof! The saber descended and severed both of the Emperor Heaven God Child's arms without any obstruction. Then, under everyone's watchful eyes, the saber sank into the top of the Emperor Heaven God Child's head and slashed down unhurriedly. It broke the Emperor Heaven God Child's consciousness, destroyed his essence spirit, and sliced him into two. The two halves of the Emperor Heaven God Child's body slid slowly to the ground along the saber. The saber sliced through the Emperor Heaven God Child's flesh and bones, making a terrifying sound. However, the Dragon Soul Saber was too sharp. It was a dermic weapon left behind by the Saber Emperor, a true divine weapon. Even the physical body of the Emperor Heaven God Child could not block it. Under the shroud of the ocean calming saber intent, although the Emperor Heaven God Child's body was sliced into two, the fresh blood and exposed organs were still frozen in his body and did not move at all. Not a single drop of blood was spilled. Instantly, the entire savage palace fell into a deathly silence. The young master of the barbarian race, the two patriarch ancestors of the barbarian race, as well as Long Tsong and the dragons, watched everything in shock and forgot to breathe. The dignified young master of the god race, a reputable Emperor Heaven body, was actually killed in the Savage Hall. Furthermore, it was done right in front of the patriarchs of the primordial 5 races. It was not that the patriarchs of the primordial 5 races did not attack. They had already attacked right away, but they could not save the Emperor Heaven God Child. Furthermore, an ancestor god had exhausted his lifespan and died first. Although the entire process seemed long, it happened in the span of a few breaths. The Emperor Heaven God Child's death was not unjust. In such a short period of time, the Dragon Phoenix True Body released many trump cards one after another. First it was Dragon Roar Ocean Calming, followed by Baron and Illumination Eye. We're in big trouble. Long Shi and the others were pale, and their hearts skipped a beat. Although the Baron of the Dragon Phoenix True Body was strong, it was not fatal for patriarchs with sufficient lifespan. Furthermore, the power of Baron was dissipating. The trump card that could threaten the patriarchs had already been used. In the rage of the remaining 2 ancestor gods, the life of the Dragon Phoenix True Body would definitely be in danger. Furthermore, this was the Savage Palace, the territory of the barbarian race. The barbarian race would definitely be enraged if the Dragon Phoenix True Body killed the Emperor Heaven God Child. If the barbarian race attacked the Dragon Phoenix True Body as well. Long Emo, how dare you kill someone in my Wildlands Hall? Don't think that the barbarian race won't dare to suppress you just because you're a taboo Dragon Phoenix. A patriarch of the barbarian race shouted with a dark expression. Indeed, the patriarch of the barbarian race was the first to attack. Why are you still wasting your breath on him? The old female ancestor god of the Protoss said sinisterly, Taboo Bloodthirst. He's already so arrogant before he's even grown. If he grows to become an emperor, all of us primordial races will be massacred by him. Kill, the middle-aged ancestor god hollered, and his blood chi burst forth. A gigantic sword appeared out of thin air between his hands, and he charged towards the dragon phoenix true body. The old female ancestor god's spirit consciousness moved, and a walking stick flew out from the ring on her finger. Holding it in her hand, she slammed it onto the ground with a loud bang and let out a sharp sound. Initially, the two patriarchs of the barbarian race were hesitant. However, they exchanged glances and decided to attack. Boom! Two tall figures swayed and arrived in the hall. They emitted a savage aura, as though they were ancient heavenly gods that had descended with wanton might. 4 ancestor realm experts descended at the same time and surrounded the dragon phoenix true body. In the blink of an eye, the dragon phoenix true body was in immense danger. After advancing to the Mahayana realm and becoming a true patriarch, his strength increased exponentially. Both his physique and bloodline had undergone a qualitative leap. The difference was extremely difficult to make up for, let alone fighting against the patriarchs. Long Tsang and the others wanted to help the dragon phoenix true body against the pressure of the 4 Mahayana patriarchs. However, they were powerless and could not get close at all. Chapter 1539. The might of an ancestor realm expert was way too strong. It was like a torrential storm that brought with it a suffocating pressure. Just now, the ancestor gods were wary of the power of Baron and did not reveal their might. Now that Baron was gone, the 4 ancestor gods no longer had any reservations and attacked one after another. The 2 ancestor gods even summoned their Dharma treasures right away with torrential killing intent and charged towards Suzimo. Dharma treasures were a major realm higher than Dharmic weapons. It was a qualitative change. This transformation was not something that could be achieved easily with any weapon refinement technique or rare materials. No matter what Dharmic weapon it was, it could only be called a Dharma treasure after being tempered by the power of divine powers. The more divine powers were tempered, the stronger the power of the Dharma treasure would be. A Dharma treasure tempered with a single minor divine power would naturally not be able to compare to one tempered with 10 minor divine powers. However, a tempered with 10 minor divine powers would be far inferior to a tempered with a single major divine power. However, be it major or minor divine powers, as long as it was a Dharma treasure, it would have an absolute advantage over Dharmic weapons. The eyes of the dragon phoenix true body shone brightly as his blood chi surged. He reared his head and roared into the skies. Against the powerful might of the 4 ancestor gods, his figure changed rapidly. Roar! A roar that resembled a dragon's roar, and a phoenix's cry burst forth. Immediately after, right in front of everyone, the dragon phoenix true body vanished and was replaced by a gigantic living being. With a dragon's head and a phoenix's tail, it stood upright with a pair of gigantic wings on its back. A red glow coiled around its body, and it was born from flames, resembling a god that controlled flames. The claws beneath the gigantic living being's abdomen were sharp and seemed like they could tear through any living being. A terrifying pressure burst forth from this living being's body. It could actually contend against 4 ancestor realm experts and be on par with them. The 2 ancestor barbarians and ancestor gods froze for a moment against that might. The bloodline of the Protoss was strong. However, against this gigantic living being, even the bloodline of the Protoss was suppressed. That was the taboo might. The dragon phoenix had descended. The temperature of the wilderness hall rose suddenly. Long Tsang and the others were shocked and retreated. Although the dragon phoenix's true body had long returned to the Dragon Bone Valley, this was the first time they had seen the dragon phoenix's true body. This kind of shock and impact was simply indescribable. In the middle of Savage Hall, the dragon phoenix and the 4 old ancestors clashed, causing the surrounding space to distort. If Long Tsang and the others did not retreat and were accidentally sucked in, it was very likely that they would be torn to pieces. If he still maintained his human form, it would be very difficult for the dragon phoenix true body to fight against the 4 ancestors. Only by conjuring the true form of the dragon phoenix and pushing his combat strength and bloodline to the limits would he have a chance of fighting against it. When the true form of the dragon phoenix appeared, A hint of hesitation flashed past the eyes of the two progenitors. They didn't want to offend the Protoss, but they also didn't want to provoke the dragons. Moreover, the dragons had a taboo in this world. The two elder gods didn't hesitate in the slightest. Upon seeing the taboo's true form, their killing intent grew even stronger, and they were the first to charge towards the dragon phoenix true form. Even if it's a taboo, the Protoss dare to kill it, the middle-aged elder god said with a murderous aura. Although the dragon phoenix was a taboo, in her opinion, it had yet to fully mature. Right now was the best opportunity to kill the taboo. The middle-aged elder god swung the gigantic sword in his hands and his blood chi surged, releasing a blinding golden light that slashed down towards the wings of the dragon phoenix true body. As for the old woman elder god, she swung the walking stick in her hands and smashed it towards the dragon head of the dragon phoenix true body. Although the old woman was in her twilight years, her burst of power for a short period of time was still extremely powerful and had a shocking aura. The two of them worked together and sealed off the path of the dragon phoenix true body, completely with a sword and a walking stick. This walking stick was made from the bones of the true ancestral dragon and sealed with the resentment of the ancestral dragon. It was refined with the blood of the ancestral dragon for 7,749 years before it was completed. The old woman said sinisterly, "Taboo, I'll let you have a taste of the power of my dragon-headed walking stick." Roar! Under the surge of divine blood, a gigantic and menacing dragon head appeared on the walking stick in the old woman's hands and let out a loud dragon roar. After the head of the divine dragon charged out, its eyes were scarlet and filled with endless resentment. It had already lost all rationality and seemed like it wanted to destroy all living beings in the world. Even against the taboo dragon phoenix, there was no fear in the divine dragon's eyes. Clang! 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 The 5 claws beneath the abdomen of the dragon phoenix true body extended at the same time and grabbed at the gigantic sword that was slashing down from midair. "You must have a death wish," the middle-aged elder god harumphed coldly. There were layers of claw shadows and cold glints. Clang! 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 The claws of the dragon phoenix collided repeatedly with the gigantic sword of the ancestor god, causing sparks to fly everywhere. The gigantic sword of the ancestor god failed to sever the claws of the dragon phoenix. Instead, it was gripped tightly by the claws and locked onto the blade of the sword without budging. At the same time, the dragon phoenix true body flapped its wings and smashed towards the incoming divine dragon head, smashing it into pieces. Immediately after, the dragon phoenix true body opened its mouth and bit down on the dragon-headed walking stick that was smashing down. The old woman was alarmed as well. Instinctively, she tugged on the dragon-headed walking stick in an attempt to retreat. However, no matter how hard she tugged, it did not budge at all. Although the Dharma treasures of the middle-aged elder god and the old woman were powerful, they were only Dharma treasures that were refined with minor divine powers. As for the dragon phoenix true body, the toughest part of its body and the strongest killing power were the claws and menacing fangs beneath its abdomen. The elder god's dharmic weapon failed to injure the dragon phoenix true body. Instead, it was controlled by the dragon phoenix true body as both parties wrestled. The expressions of the middle-aged elder god and the old woman changed slightly. Even with their combined strength, they could not retrieve the weapon. "What are you barbarians waiting for?" the middle-aged elder god suddenly hollered. The two patriarchs of the barbarian race exchanged glances and hesitated for a moment. However, they still charged forward and swung their fists to suppress the dragon phoenix true body. The huge fists descended like mountains, and their momentum was terrifying. Swash! The dragon phoenix true body did not even turn back. Swinging its tail that burned with scarlet flames, it whipped the fists of the two barbarian race patriarchs with a deafening bang. Boom! It was earth-shattering. Even Savage Palace trembled violently. Thud! 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 The two patriarchs of the barbarian race could not control themselves and retreated continuously with shocked expressions. They released the power of an ancestor but were repelled by the tale of the half-martial ancestor dragon phoenix. Furthermore, the fists of the two patriarchs of the barbarian race were tainted by the scarlet flames that did not extinguish after clashing head-on with the dragon phoenix's tail. It even traveled along the arms of the two patriarchs of the barbarian race and burned towards their bodies. The thick hair on the arms of the patriarchs of the barbarian race turned into ashes before long. The two patriarchs of the barbarian race patted the flames on their bodies in a flurry and only managed to extinguish them after a long time. Of course, although the flames burned their hair to ashes, they did not injure their bodies. The bloodline and essence spirit of the barbarian race were relatively ordinary. Their strongest aspect was their bodies. That strength was not only reflected in their physical strength and burst forth, but also their physical defense. After being burned by the flames on the dragon phoenix for a long time, the skin of the two patriarchs of the barbarian race was merely charred without any injuries. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.